Prologue. The warp, also known as the Sea of Souls, the Empyrean. It is the mirror image of the real universe, the destination of souls after creatures die, a paradise for souls to rest, a place of peace. It reflects the intelligent beings in the real universe who possess the abstract emotion of feeling. All emotions are transparent and purely fervent in the warp. Intense emotions collide and squeeze in the vast and boundless warp, twisting into vortices, storms carrying fragments of thought raging. And finally, everything transforms into the power source of the Sea of Souls. The emotions of creatures in the real universe create ripples in the warp, eventually converging into its endless waves. In the Sea of Souls, an energy world formed by various extreme emotions, time and space lose their meaning. Once the Sea of Souls was utterly calm, and the souls of intelligent beings could rest, enjoying eternal peace. An earth-shattering upheaval originating from the real universe, however, changed it forever. A terrifying war between two dominant races, spanning the entire galaxy, caused stars to shatter and life to wither. The unwillingness and pain in the souls of the billions of trillions of creatures who died in that war polluted the Sea of Souls. Any soul entering the warp would be twisted by those defiled emotions, departing from its original essence and completely falling. Countless souls and intense emotions churned ceaselessly in the unpredictable and bizarre waves of the warp, separating and converging, eventually gathering into purely extreme thoughts, returning to a single existence. Gods were born, immortal, truly existing deities, standing amidst the endless waves of the warp. Contrary to the holiness and purity possessed by gods of common faith, the true gods in the warp were born from various extreme emotions within the warp: fallen thoughts, mad emotions, twisted souls, and the most extreme blasphemy. The gods born of extreme thoughts, true chaos gods, more blasphemous than blasphemy, more fallen than fallen, their evil power exceeds the imagination of intelligent beings in reality. What they pursue are the intense, fervent, pure, and extreme emotions in the real universe. When extreme emotions appear in the real universe, the warp responds, and surging power tiers open a warp rift in the real universe. The chaos gods' minions pour out, breaking through the real barrier, descending from the rift into the real universe, seeking those souls falling to extremes. The extreme emotions of creatures in the real universe are the chaos gods' best sustenance. All chaos and suffering, beauty and happiness in the mortal world will become sustenance for the chaos gods. The warp encompasses all emotions and evil thoughts, and the chaos gods, formed by several mainstream emotions, became the supreme rulers of the Sea of Souls. Khorne, legend says he represents the god of war and slaughter. Every war in the real universe, even a dispute between two people, every drop of blood shed in war, ultimately flows to the brass throne. He wears brass armor and sits upon the brass throne, enjoying the beauty of war and slaughter and bestowing blessings upon brave warriors. Within his divine realm, rivers of lava formed by boiling blood flow, sulfurous smoke never extinguishes, and under a dim yellow sun, demons engage in endless combat to please their master. Before his throne, countless demons formed from fragments of the chaos god's consciousness frolic in the divine realm, keeping a close watch on the unstable waves in the warp for their master, ready to invade the real universe at any moment. Khorne himself sits upon the skull throne, perceiving every war in the real universe, laughing heartily at the battles between demons, and occasionally looking vigilantly into the distance. In the endless chaos of the warp, there is more than one god. The powerful gods who possess their own divine realms in the realm of chaos are collectively known as the chaos gods. They are also hostile to each other due to the different authorities they wield. The gods' gazes rarely linger in their own divine realms, but are constantly vigilant towards the other chaos gods. The four gods are always wary of each other, maintaining a delicate balance under various chains of suspicion. But there is one such chaos god who is always guarded against by the other three chaos gods: Tzeentch, also known as the Lord of Change. He is the embodiment of all schemes and wisdom, orchestrating an unending, great game amidst the surging waves of the warp. Tzeentch was once the strongest chaos god in the Empyrean. Due to his immense power, he was jointly attacked by the other three chaos gods and forced to relinquish a part of his essence, greatly reducing his strength and placing him second among the gods after Khorne. The longsword in Khorne's hand was seized from Tzeentch's grasp, and Khorne swore an oath never to let it go. He constantly monitors the movements in Tzeentch's domain, preventing Kairos from suddenly attacking to reclaim his original weapon. Unlike the earth-shattering sounds of slaughter in Khorne's domain, Tzeentch's domain is as quiet as a mortal world's library. Tzeentch's domain, the Crystal Labyrinth, stands in Tzeentch's domain, an unpredictable labyrinth composed of countless corridors and rooms and books recording all the truths of the universe. Its periphery has no defensive facilities. It welcomes scholars. Demons flap their wings like scholars, carrying books filled with secrets, traversing the crystal labyrinth, wandering back and forth in the corridors of countless knowledge and secrets, whispers echoing, weaving one scheme after another. Demons resemble their master. The more powerful the existence, the closer its visible form is to the chaos god. Tzeentch demons resemble large birds with 2 claws, long upper limbs, a mysterious dark blue body, and 2 wings on their back. As each colorful feather shimmers, the light of wisdom flows out from the gaps. The crystal labyrinth, the palace is as unpredictable as its master. In an instant, the labyrinth's arrangement and combination change trillions of times, giving rise to countless variations, and even Tzeentch demons, if slightly careless, will get lost in its endless corridors. Deep within the labyrinth, the Lord of Change sits cross-legged, suspended in the void. Through endless ages, no intelligent being has been able to pass through the crystal labyrinth to reach Tzeentch himself and receive his endless knowledge as a reward. Even the chaos god himself would occasionally be momentarily distracted by the constant changes within the crystal labyrinth. Today, perhaps this description based on linear time is not accurate. There is no concept of time in the warp, only this moment. The Lord of Change is troubled. Countless eyes symbolizing omniscience appear on his face, only to twist and transform into soul-stirring vortices the next instant. His slender avian body is constantly changing, his skin decaying from smooth to wrinkled, several sharp, fanged mouths appearing and disappearing on his body, wailing and recounting mad knowledge and truths. His long, thin arms hang down, fingers withered like bamboo joints, resting casually on his thighs. On his withered palm, 1 or 2, or countless fingers are stirring, the most complex schemes being woven into form, flowing into the real universe. Change is eternal. His trouble is not being seen or defined, but a true existence. Tzeentch was once the strongest chaos god, more powerful than any of his brothers. It was precisely this power which allowed him to look down upon the gods that aroused the apprehension of the other gods who jointly attacked Tzeentch, forcing him to relinquish a portion of his power. Faced with the gods' relentless pressure, Tzeentch had no choice but to abandon some of his authority so that he could plan his next revenge. Tzeentch destroyed a part of himself, the crystal scepter, the source of all magic, a weapon he had always held tightly in exchange for the gods' departure. The shattering of the crystal scepter caused its essence to break into countless magical incantations scattered throughout the warp, and countless magical knowledge to be dispersed throughout the universe. And the powerful energy contained within the scepter, the essence of the chaos god, fell deep within the crystal labyrinth to become a source. Countless mysteries gushed forth from it, and the moment the source landed, its true name echoed in the warp: Well of Eternity. When the Well of Eternity appeared in his domain, the Lord of Change noticed it early. Although it was formed from his own power, the mysteries within the Well of Eternity were difficult for even Tzeentch himself to fully comprehend and know. When he abandoned that authority, an incredible change occurred as the essence of the crystal scepter crashed down. Tzeentch sat withered before the Well of Eternity for countless ages, yet found it difficult to glimpse the mysterious changes within, which greatly troubled the chaos god who prided himself as the Lord of Change. Looking down, there was no physical entity in the well. What met the eye was an endless starry sky, as if the Well of Eternity was more like a portal connecting to another universe. If that were truly the case, it would be a great boon for Tzeentch. He could enter another reality, bring the universe under his control, and then take revenge on the other 3 chaos gods. In the endless past, the Lord of Change had countless times wished to restore his strength and reclaim his rightful position. In the past, the Lord of Change sent powerful greater demons into the Well of Eternity, attempting to glimpse its secrets and changes, but always gained nothing. Only one greater demon successfully returned, with a strange change in its body. Its neck split and a second head grew out. The demon's immortal body became hunched and ancient, its behavior erratic and its memory completely muddled. It could not recall what had happened in the well. It was once named Kairos, now calling itself Kairos Fateweaver, and its two heads gained the ability to peer into the past and the future, respectively. Although the changes that occurred in the Fateweaver were astonishing, they did not satisfy the Lord of Change, who dared not risk himself by personally entering the Well of Eternity. For endless ages, he stared at the Well of Eternity, lost in thought, troubled by what secrets it contained. Within the Well of Eternity, in the void beyond the chaos God's sight, a faint light drifted in the silent darkness. If the chaos God knew, he would recognize the essence of the faint light at a glance. The soul of an intelligent being called human. System, are you sure the place I'm transmigrating to has elves, dwarves, orcs, and magic? A fluctuation came from within the soul, echoing in the void without space or distance. Host, rest assured the target world has been locked and is safe. Have a nice journey. Another fluctuation came, but it was cold and mechanical. Chapter 1 BJ. William Joseph, BJ Blazkowicz, the III's luck had run out. 1 minute he was a regular guy heading to work, having forgotten to check the weather or the almanac. The next, he'd stepped off the curb and into a freak accident. A car careened around the corner, and he was sent flying, a crumpled mess of broken bones and shattered dreams. He died on the spot, his consciousness now adrift in a cold, black void. It was in this emptiness that he was, conveniently, picked up by a passing system, which promised to whisk him away to a new world. A world of elves, magic, and dwarves, the system's cold, mechanical voice had announced with cheerful confidence. Steampunk airships and glittering cyberpunk cities await. Blazkowicz's flickering soul settled, a sense of quiet relief washing over him. The thought of a beautiful new beginning, a second chance with magic and monsters, sent a shiver of hope through his ethereal form. He began to envision a future filled with fantastical adventure. Host, the system's voice crackled, no longer confident but full of an awkward hesitation. It seems we took a wrong turn. Damn it, Blazkowicz's consciousness flared with silent rage, his soul light flickering violently. If he still had a physical body, he'd be shaking his fist at the damn system, shouting every curse word he knew. This damn forsaken program was completely unreliable. All right, take a breath and tell me where we are, he managed to say, forcing himself to calm down. He reasoned with himself, thinking a different destination couldn't be that bad. He had a system, after all. What could possibly go wrong? 40K. I'll give you one more chance to get your words straight. Blazkowicz's soul form trembled, threatening to tear itself apart. What K? Warhammer 40,000, the system said, its voice flat and utterly devoid of the forced cheerfulness from before. It was the cruelest, most brutal answer Blazkowicz could have imagined. The system's answer shattered his last remaining hope. He floated in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity before a single message echoed from his soul. Just end me now. I'm tired, boss. Blazkowicz knew about Warhammer 40K among his fellow fans. There was a well-known joke. Everyone says they love this universe, but nobody ever goes. It was a proverb that perfectly encapsulated the sheer terror of the setting, a place so dangerous and morally bankrupt that no sane person would ever willingly step foot in it. The very thought of it sent a chill through his soul. Was that place even fit for human life? It was a galaxy-spanning carnival of war and destruction, a tomb for humanity and a graveyard for morality. Not to mention the monstrous entities lurking in the galaxy's darkest corners, the maddeningly twisted warp, and the casual planetary destruction that happened every other Tuesday. The imperium of man's moral compass had long ago broken, and the morality of the alien Xenos was even worse. They all saw one another as little more than cannon fodder, forever plotting and scheming to wipe each other out. There were the Eldari, a race of space elves who had lorded over the galaxy for millions of years, viewing every other race as nothing more than uncivilized monkeys. And the orcs who lived for fighting. They were always on their way to a fight and were either cunning and brutal or brutally cunning. The squats were a bunch of stubborn, traditionalist dwarves who refused to move with the times. And then there were the Necrons, a race of space metal skeletons whose brains had long since rotted away from 100 million years of tomb sleep. They flew through space at faster-than-light speeds, dreaming of the day they would reclaim the stars. Even the tyrannids who came from beyond the galaxy ate everything in their path, leaving nothing but dust in their wake. They all had one thing in common: they got along with humans, in the most literal sense of the phrase, of course, a brutal, never-ending war to the last man. The Imperium of Man itself was no better. It showed no mercy to Xenos, heretics, or even its own people. It was cruel to its enemies and even crueler to its own. Blazkovich's heart sank even further when he thought of the warp, the twisted mirror of the real universe and the eternal enemy of the Imperium. Its gods, the god of courage, the god of love, the god of wisdom, and the god of life, were all exceptionally friendly, the kind who would happily tear your heart, lungs, and soul from your body and consume them. At least I have a system, Blazkovich tried to comfort himself. He knew this was unreliable, but it was his only lifeline now. He figured he could find a hive city and live out 180 years until he died of old age. As for immortality, he'd already given up on that. In a world this crazy, living too long would only attract the attention of the four gods. He shivered at the thought. The four gods would probably lose their minds and team up to destroy the universe if they ever found out that the cosmic truth they so cherished was just a corporate cash grab from another dimension. Ding! A crisp notification sound jolted Blazkovich from his morbid thoughts. He glanced at the system's prompt, and this time he couldn't hold back. His curses echoed silently in the void. The system was trying to force an uninstall. It was preparing to bail and leave him in the dust. "You coward, you're ditching me just because things got tough," he screamed internally. "You got me into this, you ruined my life, and now you're running away." The data was corrupted. The multiverse GPS search was misleading, and the destination was incorrect, the system replied, its voice offering a faint, almost apologetic tone. "I'm leaving now, host. No, former host. Take care, Toodles." The system chose to run away, decisively abandoning its host. The Warhammer 40K universe was a place unfit for humans, and even more so for a delicate system. "What are you so afraid of, you useless piece of junk?" Blazkovich's thoughts raced. "It's just the four gods, right? Come on, we'll fight them together." He appealed to it, desperation lacing every thought. "If you must leave, at least make sure I can survive. A roof over my head, food in my belly just for 180 years. A wife or two, that's all I ask, just the bare necessities." He knew this system was his last hope. Without it, he was dead, just a new soul to be consumed by the galaxy's madness. The 40K universe is too chaotic. The cost-to-benefit ratio is disproportionate. Under the omnipresent gaze of the four gods, this system's actions of reversing causality and disrupting the timeline would require an immense, unacceptable cost. The system's uninstall bar paused for a moment before continuing its grand retreat. It had considered his pleas, but it chose to give up. "I don't care, you tricked me here and now you're abandoning me. The best-case scenario is that my soul will be scattered to the wind." Blazkovich's soul form quivered with despair and sorrow. "How can you do this to me? How could this happen to me? I made my mistakes." After a long, drawn-out plea, his pitiful state seemed to make the system relent. The uninstall progress bar froze once more, giving Blazkovich a glimmer of hope. He immediately pressed his advantage, abandoning all pride and dignity. "Just give me something to survive with, something to make up for all this." The system fell silent for a moment. Then its mechanical voice returned, slow and deliberate. "Very well, I will halt the forced uninstall, will consider this a divorce, and I will use the remaining power to prepare a gift for you, former host." "Fine," Blazkovich agreed immediately, his soul form practically vibrating with relief. "I have only one request," he said, his voice low and serious. "Don't let me be targeted by the four gods, and don't let the knowledge in my head leak out." A wise man had once said, "The only way to survive in 40K is to avoid being noticed by the four gods." "I can't do that," the system replied without a moment's hesitation. "The moment you enter the 40K universe, the four gods will immediately sense your existence. They are the pinnacle of this single universe. Nothing can escape their gaze. You are a soul from another universe, and they will never let you go. The knowledge you carry in your mind could help them understand their own origins and ascend to even greater heights. They won't let you get away. Then what can I do? Blazkowicz asked, his despair returning. He had thought this would be a grand transmigration journey, but it had devolved into a slow, agonizing death. I will split your memories and leave you with a completely pure soul, so you won't fear the four gods' scrutiny. How is that different from just dying and being reborn? There's a big difference, former host. I've already prepared a gift for you, just look. As the system's voice faded, a ball of crimson energy appeared in the infinite void. It glowed with an ancient, terrifying aura. Even though it was faint, the power it contained made the void tremble and the fabric of space itself grow restless, threatening to tear apart. Blazkowicz, directly in front of it, was the first to feel its overwhelming might. His consciousness felt as if it was being flayed alive, his soul light dimming and flickering as if about to be extinguished. What is this? He stammered, his words barely audible. The destroyer essence, the system's voice answered. The moment the red sphere appeared, the system had strengthened its protection of Blazkowicz's soul, preventing him from being instantly annihilated by the pressure. Its mechanical voice trembled slightly as it spoke of the sphere's origin with the utmost solemnity. The voice grew louder, as if chanting an epic poem. His great figure traverses the multiverse, crossing time, space, frost, and fire, hunting down the demons he hates. Ah, great doom slayer, may your power and wrath descend upon this place, making them tremble, giving them torment, bestowing upon them destruction. The destroyer essence. Blazkowicz searched his soul for information. Following the system's description, he finally found it, a figure in Predator armor carrying a double-barreled shotgun hunting demons. The Sentinel's chosen warrior, the Doom Slayer. He finally understood. He was going to be more than fine. The system hadn't abandoned him, it had given him an ultimate gift. Chapter 2 Gods. The Doom Slayer. This guy was the real deal. Just speaking his name could make demons stop their late-night crying. He was the personification of pure, unadulterated power, the walking nightmare of every cosmic evil, and a living, breathing embodiment of destruction. For him, the hellish realm of the warp was like a walk in the park. So familiar he probably had a preferred coffee shop there. This wasn't just a tough guy. He was the tough guy. He'd single-handedly flattened entire dimensions, stomped angels, and ripped demons limb from limb. He'd been so good at his job that he'd almost wiped out the demon population of hell, broke into heaven to personally end a god, and finished off the multi-universal creator, the so-called Dark Lord. The warp, a single glare from him would disintegrate a legion of greater demons, and his lowest growl would make them soil their ethereal pants. If this elder god showed up, Korn would probably offer him a chair. Slaanesh would suddenly be a blushing, demure maiden. Tzeentch would lose his mind and start reciting children's nursery rhymes, and Nurgle would just go home to garden plants and vegetables. Hold on there, the system's voice cut through Blazkowicz's chaotic, trembling thoughts. Don't get ahead of yourself. This isn't the full-powered Doom Slayer. This is just an insignificant little fragment that broke off during his big fight with the Dark Lord. Blazkowicz swallowed hard. His heart, which had just settled into a nice, calm rhythm, lurched into his throat. So, why exactly did you pull it out for me? He was starting to get a bit fed up with this system. It had already proven to be a total flake, abandoning him at the worst possible moment. Why on earth had he trusted this system and gone along with its bizarre transmigration plan in the first place? Even incomplete, it is the pure essence of the Doom Slayer, the system said, its mechanical voice sounding as steady as a rock. It's weak, sure, but it carries all the core concepts of his main body. If you use it well, it will absolutely be able to protect you. The system's plan began to unfold, sounding like a perfect, if terrifying, chess match. First, I'll integrate this essence into your soul to make sure the warp doesn't corrupt you. Then I'll strip away your memories. When you arrive in the 40K universe, your soul will be completely pure and flawless. Even the chaos gods won't find anything to latch onto. A pure soul will attract their attention, but they won't be able to get any information from you, and they certainly won't dare to mess with a piece of the Doom Slayer's essence. And your memories, former host, the system paused, a small, faint light separating from Blazkovich's soul. I'll seal them, and while the four gods are distracted with you, I'll launch them into the deepest part of the warp. Whether they can ever find their way back to you will be entirely up to your own good luck. Blazkovich considered the plan. It was a flawless design, a desperate Hail Mary to ensure his survival. Given the circumstances, it was really his only option. To survive Warhammer, he had to accept it. All right, let's do this thing. The system, sensing no time to waste, immediately began its work as their destination approached. His memories began to fade, slowly at first, then faster as the system detached itself from his soul. Just before his consciousness fell into darkness, Blazkovich managed to get one last thought in. System, thanks. For all his complaints, it seemed the system had a heart after all. It hadn't left him to die and had, at the very least, given him a fighting chance. Former host, I'm also sending you some knowledge. The system's light cluster pulsed slightly. From now on, you'll be on your own. I hope this helps. Thank you, Blazkovich replied, a wave of sincere gratitude washing over him as his vision went black. With the system's help, the destroyer essence fully merged with his soul, becoming a single crimson light. Goodbye, the mechanical voice said one last time. In the dark void, two light clusters, one large and one small, separated. The large one zipped away, while the small, red one continued along its path, plunging into a cosmic tear at the edge of the universe. In Tzeentch's realm, the wind howled with a new intensity. For the first time in eons, the well of eternity stirred, spitting out powerful, unholy storms. The crystal labyrinth trembled as countless lords of change stretched their necks, their eyes wide with anticipation, desperate to see what was happening. One of them, the Lord of Change, Kairos, twisted his fingers, weaving countless magical sigils into existence. The power of the chaos gods formed a dark blue net, ready to catch whatever was about to emerge. The storm's roar intensified, bursting out of Tzeentch's realm and briefly scattering the endless warp storms. The Lords of Change were ecstatic, their raspy voices echoing through the warp in a symphony of delight. Oh no! A greater demon was born in that moment, its first-ever words being its master's startled cry. The magic net was blown to pieces by the storm. Tzeentch, ignoring everything else, covered the well of eternity with his withered hand. In the next moment, his body sprouted countless mouths, all of them wailing in agony. Ah! The painful cries of the chaos god struck his demons like a lightning bolt, and the Lords of Change all shrieked in unison, feeling their master's immense pain. Tzeentch slowly opened his withered palm. 100 eyes appeared on his face, all staring at the object in his hand. It was a crimson sphere of light, embedded in his palm. It was burning his immortal body, and smoke was pouring from the wound. Tzeentch and his demons were so completely focused on this new thing that they completely missed the second, tiny speck of light that had drifted out of the well of eternity. Without a sound, without a ripple, Blazkovich's memories, contained in a small speck of dust, were carried by the warp's energy and vanished into its boundless tides, unnoticed by any demon or chaos god. My lord, the Lords of Change shouted as they gathered around Tzeentch. Kairos, the most conspicuous among them, twisted his two heads together, his eyes glowing as he tried to perceive the past. My eyes, he cried out, covering his eye of yesterday as blue blood poured between his fingers. He had tried to look into the chaos god's past, and his eye had been overwhelmed by the endless information. The Lords of Change spread out, their staves held high, wary of any more changes. After confirming there was no danger, they cautiously asked, My lord, what caused you such pain? A chaos god was injured, his very essence damaged. This had never happened before, not in all of history. It was unimaginable. Tzeentch simply stared at the red sphere, saying nothing. The charred wound on his hand vanished as the sphere settled in his palm. He understood its origin in an instant. A soul of incomparable purity, carrying a noble essence he had never seen before. Although it was weak, It gave off an ancient, magnificent aura, a pureness that transcended everything. It was filled with a primal power that was difficult to even comprehend, and deep within its core was an unshakable, burning rage. He applied a little pressure to the sphere, and a sharp, stinging sensation shot up his arm. Tzeentch's 100 pupils widened in astonishment as he saw that the power of the warp was being slowly absorbed by the soul, becoming a part of it. The Chaos God was so surprised that he almost lost his grip on it, and the soul in his hand grew slightly stronger. Before he could study it further, a burst of wild laughter came from outside the labyrinth. The laughter was deep and powerful, accompanied by the clanking of armor. The Lords of Change all tensed, tightening their grip on their staves. Khorne's power spread, and rolling red clouds appeared at the edge of Tzeentch's domain. The two gods' powers clashed at the border, an invisible contest beginning before either gods will had even descended. What's so funny? Ha! Why, it's seeing a wound appear on eternal change, proving that even change has its decline. Another boisterous burst of laughter came from a different direction, accompanied by a wet, gurgling hiccup. A wave of green, boundless vitality erupted at the edge of Tzeentch's realm, and overgrown weeds turned into towering trees. Nurgle, another of the four gods, had arrived, mocking Tzeentch's helplessness. They were natural enemies. Tzeentch was the lord of eternal change, while Nurgle was the master of stagnation. Chapter 3 Chaos Gods. Nurgle, the plague god, let out a booming belly laugh that shook the foundations of his rotting mansion. The cosmic sound of his mirth rattled the flies swarming around his enormous, diseased body, causing maggots to rain down into the colossal cauldron he was stirring. It was a good day indeed, for his chief rival was hurting. Perhaps this is a rare joy in the endless void. A seductive, gender-neutral voice purred, like a silk ribbon on a gentle breeze. Pink mist and the scent of intoxicating perfume billowed through the air as Slaanesh, the dark prince and lord of pleasure, arrived. One by one, the wills of the chaos gods gathered in Tzeentch's domain, drawn by the scent of his weakness like sharks to blood. Tzeentch, meanwhile, sat cross-legged and calm as an abyss, his many eyes taking in the scene. He gave a smug little smile as his lords of change gathered around him, their staves creaking in their claws. The last time this happened, their master broke his own staff. What would happen this time? In a hoarse, crackling voice, Tzeentch finally broke the silence. A soul erupted from the well of eternity, and it harmed me. The gods' mocking grins vanished, their gazes zeroing in on the red, translucent soul Tzeentch held in his withered hand. Their expressions became deadly serious. While the power of the four gods ebbed and flowed with mortal events, their might was still comparable. A soul capable of harming Tzeentch was a soul that could harm any of them. Lies, it's another trick, Nurgle said with contempt, convinced this was just another one of Tzeentch's elaborate schemes to mess with them. Hand it over, Khorne growled, his voice a tidal wave of pure rage. He could feel the bottomless fury within the soul and knew it was meant for him. The blood clouds at the edge of his realm thickened, ready to snatch it by force. Slaanesh said nothing, simply observing the pure, untainted soul with an almost ravenous interest. Far away in his pleasure palace, their true form licked its lips, eager for a taste of this delicious, mysterious prize. Tzeentch, outwardly composed, was cackling with glee on the inside. He tossed the soul into the churning warp with a dramatic flourish. "It's yours." The warp immediately erupted into a chaotic storm as the three chaos gods lunged for the prize. Their wills turned into writhing tentacles and razor-sharp nets, thrashing through the sea of souls as they raced to claim the faint red light. Perhaps it was a perfectly executed scheme, but the wills of all three chaos gods touched the soul at almost the exact same moment. "Tzeentch, do you want to start another war?" Khorne roared in a rage that was tempered by a searing pain. The moment his will touched the soul, it felt as if it were on fire. He was absolutely furious. Slaanesh and Nurgle were no better off. The Prince of Excess gave a joyful moan, reveling in the exquisite pain, while Grandfather Nurgle grunted, enduring the torment that reached deep into his very essence. The Lord of Change secretly smirked as the mouths on his body began to repeat the same sentence in a light, sing-song voice. My words were sincere. It is you who did not believe. You reap what you sow, so don't blame me. He had manipulated them without even resorting to a scheme. All four of them had been damaged, but since they all started from the same place, no one could truly mock the other. HMPH. After suffering a humiliating setback, Khorne decided his next act would be to plan a full-scale assault on Tzeentch's domain. But for now, there was something more important. The pure soul, whose origin was unknown, had begun to swell after absorbing the warp energy from the three gods' wills. The gods could pierce its soul with their gaze, but they couldn't see its true essence. It seemed to have completed a strange evolution, slowly beginning to absorb the free-floating power in the warp without being corrupted by it. It remained a glowing red sphere, pure and flawless. Tzeentch's amused smile faded. The gods' gazes were once again focused on the soul, each waiting for a chance to strike. This soul absorbed energy without any cost and wasn't tainted by warp power. It was an anomaly, and if they could unlock its secret or consume it, the power they could gain would be unimaginable. It now has the power of a low-level demon, Nurgle's voice boomed, reminding the gods that time was of the essence. Nobody knew the soul's limits. The longer they waited, the more dangerous it would become. A new god might be born in the warp. Put it in my domain, Slaanesh purred. I will thoroughly enjoy the exquisite pain and perhaps even conduct a little research. Get lost, Khorne barked, his voice filled with pure contempt for his rival. He wasn't about to let that harlot defile the essence he was now claiming as his own. He and Slaanesh were natural opposites. He was the strict, disciplined warrior, while Slaanesh was an indulgent libertine. The blood god's ultimate dream was to personally throttle that bitch Slaanesh. I have a suggestion, Tzeentch said, his mouth transforming into all-seeing eyes as his voice spoke from an unknown place. Fine, Khorne grunted. Fine, Nurgle said. Speak your lie, Slaanesh said, their voice laced with disdain. The Lord of Change ignored the insult. We can't unravel its essence now, so why not let it develop? We'll place it at the intersection of our four realms and watch it grow. Any developments we will know immediately. I agree, Khorne said after a moment's thought. It was the only plan that made sense and didn't favor any one of them. I also agree, Nurgle added. Let me take it to the border, Slaanesh said impatiently, desperate to touch the red soul again and experience that extraordinary pain. Get lost, Khorne roared again. He used a warp storm to send the soul to the border of the four realms, claiming it as his own. His will was the first to leave, heading to the border to keep a watchful eye. One by one, the other gods departed, and the warp returned to a fragile peace. Unaware of all this, Blazkovich floated in a serene, thoughtless state. He had no idea that he was now the target of the four most powerful beings in the universe, and his soul was floating at the intersection of their domains, guarded by their armies of greater demons. The warp had fallen into a delicate, new balance because of him. The chaos gods suspected and guarded against each other, strengthening their borders to avoid losses. And the one who started it all was just calmly absorbing warp energy, growing stronger every second. Neither Blazkovich nor the system knew it, but warp time was as fickle as its gods. Due to an unforeseen hiccup, he hadn't actually arrived in the year 40K yet. Chapter 4 Time. Time in the warp is as meaningful as a politician's promise. 10,000 years, an instant, eternity. It's all just a blur of psychic turbulence and demonic high-fives. Amidst this temporal mush, the mysterious soul, protected by the four squabbling chaos gods, continued to grow in power, its light a beacon at their shared borders. The churning of the warp's endless seas portended a major shift in the mortal universe. A momentous, galaxy-shattering event was about to go down. This story begins with the Eldari, a people uplifted by the Old Ones. During the War in Heaven, a conflict that forever twisted the fabric of the warp, they were given a leg up and broke free from their primitive, dirt-worshipping existence. They became a galactic superpower, helping the Old Ones fight off the star gods, aka the cosmic vampires and their scary robot servants, the Necrons. After an epoch-long war, the Old Ones were defeated and vanished. In a brilliant move of betrayal, the Necrons turned on the star gods, and after paying a truly horrifying price, managed to shatter their masters into countless pieces. The cost was so high that the Necrons, now a bunch of rusty skeletons, knew they couldn't rule the galaxy. So they decided to take a nice, long nap, a great sleep that would last for millennia. With everyone else gone, the Eldari, once a mere sidekick, inherited a galaxy and became its new top dog. For tens of millions of years, they reigned supreme, their technology and psychic abilities far surpassing everyone else. They were the masters of the stars, and they knew it. This unchecked power and success led to a galaxy-sized ego. They began to see every other race as less than, a bunch of primitive monkeys not worth their time. It was this monumental arrogance that blinded them to the catastrophe they were brewing. Eldari society became a never-ending party. Hedonism wasn't a pastime, it was a way of life. The temples to their gods became venues for increasingly depraved acts, and their faith, once the source of their divine protection, collapsed. As simple pleasures became boring, they moved on to more extreme forms of gratification, and their powerful psychic abilities, a gift from their creators, became a deadly weapon pointed at their own heads. Psychic talent is like a neon sign in a dark alley. Every time a psychic uses their power, their soul shines brightly in the warp, drawing in hungry demons like a moth to a flame. The demons then possess them, creating a handy warp-to-real space portal. Almost every member of the Eldari was a powerful psychic, so their depravity became a cosmic broadcast. All of their extreme emotions, their joy, their pain, their unchecked indulgence, swirled together in the sea of souls, creating a bizarre and very loud storm. The dark emotions of a galaxy-spanning empire of pleasure-seekers converged in the warp, fueling and awakening a new chaos god that had been quietly gestating. Then, with a single, universe-shattering shriek, they were born, Slaanesh. From the moment of his birth, the Dark Prince already existed in all past and future timelines. The real-world events merely anchored what had already happened. Slaanesh's first scream tore open a warp rift right in the middle of the Eldari Empire, swallowing most of their galaxy-spanning territory into the hellish realm. This was a particularly rude birth, even by chaos standards. Slaanesh had been nourished by the Eldari, so they were the perfect snack for them. The gods they worshipped, even better. They were the perfect birthday treat. They consumed them, all of them, in one go. The Eldari Empire, which had ruled for tens of millions of years, came crashing down. The heart of their civilization was replaced by a permanent scar on reality, a wound in space that would forever serve as a warning. In the wake of this total cosmic collapse, only a handful of Eldari survivors who had seen the writing on the wall managed to escape. Their pantheon of gods was no more. Some fled, most died. After a feast that would make a gluttony demon blush, Slaanesh retreated to their new divine realm to begin an eternity of indulgence. The warp storm dissipated, and the new god took his place in the great game. The four gods turned their gaze back to their favorite soul, still wishing to claim it for themselves, but their attention was suddenly diverted by something far more interesting. A wisp of golden light appeared in the warp, and a golden sun rose. It shone with a cold, pure light that drove demons to their knees and made lesser creatures shiver. It was a powerful, psychic beacon, a brazen challenge to the gods themselves. Where the golden sun passed, the power of the warp receded. Demons who dared to look directly at it were simply incinerated, erased from existence. "Chaos gods!" a voice boomed, echoing in every known language and countless unknown whispers. The golden sun hung in the void, waiting for a response. A greater demon of corn, the kind that was made of pure spite and a million blades, roared and charged toward the golden sun, his twin axes held high. "I'll take your head and give it to my lord." The golden will simply ignored him. Its attention wasn't on the demon, but on the true powers of the warp. "Gods," it called out again, "I am here to negotiate." Humiliated, the greater demon roared even louder, cleaving the warp's chaotic currents with a blood-red axe-light. The blow would have annihilated a planet, but the golden sun remained completely still. It didn't even have a defense up. When the axes finally hit, something impossible happened. The Khorne demon, an unstoppable force, simply vanished. As its body touched the light, it was instantly incinerated, turning into a cloud of dust that was scattered by the holy rays. Human, a voice rumbled, the will of the four gods descending at once. You have returned. What do you wish to gain now? The four gods, burning with unlookable at majesty, converged on the golden sun. Burning fireballs, lightning storms, and icy winds appeared, and demons all around knelt in worship. The golden sun, however, remained utterly calm. A new transaction, the golden will whispered, a concept unheard of in both the mortal universe and the warp. My knowledge combined with the knowledge you grant, a convergence of the warp and reality, to create a unique and powerful existence. Here are the specifics. Golden light burst forth as the sun sent 4 orbs of light toward the gods, each containing the full terms of the deal. The gods understood the contents instantly. The human had been here before, bargaining for forbidden knowledge. This time he was even more audacious. He knew the gods couldn't refuse. We agree to your transaction, human, Tzeentch said, speaking for all of them. However, I think we should add one more condition. The Lord of Change's face stretched into a wide, wild, and truly evil grin. Chapter 5 Tzeentch. As the Lord of Change spoke, the warp performed a dizzying, stomach-churning magic trick. Tzeentch, with a flick of his wrist, pulled the golden sun deep into the heart of the Sea of Souls. When the universe righted itself, the landscape had changed entirely. The chaos gods and their brave, new guests stood at the junction of the 4 divine domains. This place was no longer a desolate wasteland. It was now a monument to the endless and insane rivalry of the ruinous powers. Khorne's domain was a massive war fortress, a brutalist monument to violence forged of brass, with rivers of molten lava pouring down its sheer walls. Demon engines chugged and groaned through the smoke, and Khorne's greater demons trained their armies, ready to prove their gods might through war at a moment's notice. Opposite this metal monstrosity was Tzeentch's lair, a fully transparent labyrinth that twisted reality and made a mockery of space and time. A demon lord with a name as long as an Eon chanted ancient incantations, and mysterious whispers slithered through the corridors, turning the seemingly fragile walls into an impenetrable fortress of pure magic. Slaanesh's territory was a swirling pink haze, with the sound of decadent, thumping music thrumming in the air. Thorned spires pierced the sky, where pleasure and torment coexisted in a twisted ballet. In the exquisitely corrupted palaces, Slaanesh's dancers moved with a languid grace, performing an endless, seductive dance for their dark prince. Finally, there was Nurgle's garden. It was a place of surprisingly peaceful, if disgusting, harmony. Twisted, pulsating tree trunks stood in the swampy ground, and the decaying grass sang in a low, gurgling tone. Maggots and plagues squirmed in the mud while Nurgle's jovial demons chased each other with carefree laughter. The bloated, rotting great unclean one, his belly split with a putrid gash, shook off dead flies with every hearty laugh. The air was so thick with tension you could cut it with Khorne's axe. The armies of the 4 gods stood at attention, eyeing each other, each waiting for a single reason to erupt into a chaotic, glorious battle. And in the middle of it all, a single tower stood tall. It was 888 meters high, a brass monument to shared vanity. Its body was a tapestry of joyous and tormented limbs, and it was wrapped in ghastly green, glowing branches. The top of the spire, a brass-cast 8-pointed star, held a flickering blue psychic flame. In the fire, the red soul of the Doom Slayer floated, serene and untouched. The tower was a joint project, a monument to their shared greed. Over the eons, the red soul had absorbed the warp's energy, growing in power until it far surpassed the strength of even the greater demons, reaching a demigod level of power. As the wills of the 4 gods descended, the thousands of demons knelt, holding their monstrous power in check. "Our gods are here," they shouted in unison. The chaos gods ignored them. Khorne, with a rare flash of his true form, rose from his skull throne and glared at Tzeentch. "What are you trying to pull? This wasn't part of the humans' deal." Tzeentch gave his signature, conniving grin. Without a word, he sent a telepathic message to the other gods. We've spent countless years trying to unlock its secrets with no success, but with this human's deal, my wisdom has foreseen a new path. What path? Nurgle grumbled, clearly annoyed by the unpredictability. When the soul leaves the warp and is once again endowed with humanity by this mortal, its perfect purity might develop a weakness. A human with immense power, a demigod walking in the mortal universe, they are simply our sustenance. The Lord of Change's voice was a silky whisper of pure evil as he revealed his plan. To them, the golden human was just another tool, another cog in the machine. He was the protagonist of a new cycle in the great game, a new toy to be broken. The gods whispered amongst themselves, and then, satisfied, they all nodded. I agree, Khorne said, a glint of cunning in his eye. He was a war god, he could easily seize control of any future events. Agreed, Nurgle said, a small smile on his face. He hated change, but at the end of all things, change was a necessity. He would simply wait at the end of the road to claim his victory. I also agree, Slaanesh said, their voice laced with pure pleasure. They were the youngest of the gods, but they were confident in their ability to corrupt anything. With their own schemes in place, the four gods added a new clause to the deal and presented it to the master of mankind. The gods' wills became one as they spoke. Human, sign it with your soul, do not attempt to betray it. The golden sun looked at the demigod's soul in the tower, a flicker of surprise in its gaze. How had the soul of one mortal managed to unite the four gods in a single collective purpose? He had no time to ponder. Humanity was waiting for its salvation. I agree, he sighed, and with that he left a piece of his essence on the scroll. Ha-ha-ha-ha-ha, the transaction complete. The chaos gods roared with laughter, their unhinged mirth echoing through the warp as they left the frontier. The golden sun waited in place, as the four gods used their supreme power to find their payment. The sea of souls churned and exploded as they hunted down demigods hiding in the warp. Demigods, they were unique beings, reflections of the warp itself, but subservient to the four gods. They were the waves to the four gods' continents, constantly probing for new boundaries. Now they were prey. The power of the four gods was like a cold bucket of water on a pot of boiling oil, forcing the demigods out of hiding. Khorne, clad in brass armor, simply looked out from his throne. With a single mighty strike, he shattered the essence of a demigod, erasing its consciousness and leaving behind a pure soul, a divine spark. Tzeentch, a master of magic, sat suspended in the void. His fingers moved with lightning speed, stirring up blue flames that refined the demigod's will, burning away its identity. Slaanesh moved with a graceful, elegant motion, piercing the warp with their rapier, and neatly plucking a divine spark from the tip of their blade. Nurgle, meanwhile, was less elegant. He scooped a screaming demigod into his cauldron with a giant ladle. When he pulled it out, it was a pure divine spark. Enough, Tzeentch said, 5 divine sparks in his palm. The deal requires 20, any more would upset the stability of the Sea of Souls. HMPH, I am not yet satisfied, Khorne snorted, but he tossed out his 5 divine sparks. The others followed suit, and a total of 20 divine sparks floated before Tzeentch. The four gods had done their part. Chapter 6 Emperor. Tzeentch's will swept across his infinite domain, and his phantom form arrived before the golden sun, clutching a handful of twitching souls. Master of mankind, the chaos god purred, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. The master of mankind, the golden will had called himself that. In the wake of the Eldari Empire, a new species had risen in the mortal universe, humanity, and this man was their strongest psyker. Where is my payment? The golden sun replied, neither confirming nor denying his identity. Tzeentch laughed, his voice like the crackle of ancient lightning. He handed over the 20 divine sparks and chuckled, Master of mankind? Heh heh. This human was no mere mortal. He could face the four gods and wield the power of the warp without paying the cosmic price. Any power, psychic or otherwise, came with an equal and opposite debt. Tzeentch knew that underneath the human skin, the golden will was something far more ancient, something with a love for humanity, and an endless, devouring darkness. The master of mankind, well aware of who he was dealing with, kept his silence. Facing the master of fate, every word, every gesture was a minefield. He took the souls, and with a swirl of golden energy, he and his prize vanished into the warp. I look forward to the day you stand alongside us. Tzeentch's voice echoed behind him, a chilling promise. I will never stand alongside you. I am the master of mankind. I am the emperor. The golden sun replied, its defiance ringing through the void. Tzeentch simply smiled a sinister, wide grin. You will, he whispered, watching the spot where the human had disappeared. We will all bear witness to the fall, the birth of the King of Darkness. A new cycle had begun, and the great game would have another player, perhaps two. The other gods, Korn, the brutish jock, Slaanesh, the debauched party girl, and Nurgle, the moldy dad, were merely pawns in Tzeentch's eternal plan. He returned to his palace, eager to start his calculations. Meanwhile, in the real universe, time marched on. Civilizations rose and fell, and the tide of life surged endlessly. Humanity, with its boundless desire to conquer the stars, discovered the warp and the secrets of faster-than-light travel. From the 1st to the 15th millennium, they ruled the galaxy with technology and logic, their destiny seemingly unshakable. Their golden age of technology was a sight to behold. Powerful golden men guided them, while bioengineered iron men assisted in the day-to-day. For protection, the iron men created self-aware thinking machines called the Iron Men. What could possibly go wrong with an army of sentient robots? Then, for reasons no one knows, the Iron Men turned on their creators. A brutal war of creator versus creation tore across the galaxy. Entire star systems were annihilated, stars were drained of energy, and nanobots devoured all life. The Eldari, who had watched from afar, even stepped in to help, but it was too late. Humanity won, but at a horrifying cost. The machines were defeated, but humanity's vast empire was now in shambles. Without their AI assistance, much of humanity's technology was lost forever. Isolated colonies regressed, and humanity was at the mercy of its own broken technology. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, the warp's residual poisons began to infect various worlds. Psychers appeared, mutations spread, and without a central government, many planets fell under the rule of chaos and depravity. The age of strife had begun. From the 25th to the 30th millennium, humanity teetered on the brink of extinction. And then he appeared. A man who had been there all along. A perpetual, a secret immortal who had lived through humanity's entire history, gathering knowledge and power. He was an ancient, powerful psyker who had lived for thousands of years in secret. His name was lost to history, but now he called himself something new, the Emperor. He began his great work on humanity's home world, Terra, a broken planet ruled by warlords and tech barbarians. He created a legion of genetically modified soldiers, the Thunder Warriors, to unify the planet. But they were deeply flawed and couldn't be used to retake the galaxy. The Emperor was faced with a choice, a slow, painstaking reconquest that might take millennia, or to do something he had avoided his entire life, return to the warp. Did you succeed? A low, hoarse voice whispered as the Emperor's consciousness returned to his body. It was a voice filled with worry and desperate hope. Chapter 7 Plan. Of course, my old friend. The Emperor opened his eyes, a flicker of exhaustion crossing his face. He held his palm out, and the glowing, ethereal cargo of his warp journey came into view. 21 lesser divine essences, like captured fireflies, drifted gently above his hand. They swirled with a kaleidoscope of colors, casting a shifting light across the rough stone walls of the chamber. The room itself was a paradox, a simple cave carved with blasphemous runes and the 8-pointed star of chaos, a symbol of the very things they sought to conquer. As the divine essences entered the physical world, their brilliance dimmed, suppressed by the iron laws of reality. But one of them remained stubbornly bright, the red soul, the special one that had captivated the chaos gods. A lean, wiry man with a hunched back stood before the Emperor, his brow furrowed in concern. This was Malkador, the Sigillite, the Emperor's oldest and most trusted friend. To him, the Emperor appeared as an impossible vision of perfection, a holy and radiant figure. He leaned on his aquila staff, his expression tense, his hand clutching it tightly. "What is this?" Malkador asked, his voice a low rumble. He was a psyker of immense power and knew well that the warp's influence always waned in reality. The Red Soul's defiance of this rule was deeply unsettling. The Emperor's sharp gaze settled on the Red Soul. "A special existence," he said, his voice grave. "The only condition the four gods gave me, it was part of the deal." With a thought, the Emperor's dazzling psychic radiance receded, revealing a weary, middle-aged man in a simple white robe trimmed with gold. He was a perfect picture of a noble Roman philosopher, but his face was lined with a profound fatigue. Going toe-to-toe with the ruinous powers was no small feat. Their corrupting influence was a poison that seeped into everything, and even he was not immune. "Can't we just destroy it?" Malkador's face hardened, and an orange-red psychic flame erupted from his hand. The aquila on his staff seemed to come to life in the glow, and a demon mark, a unique symbol of destruction, condensed in his palm. Malkador was ready to turn the foul thing to dust in an instant. The Emperor gently placed a hand on his friend's. "I can't. The contract is binding, not now at least. It must be born in the real universe. As for what it will become, I don't know." He paused, a wry look in his eyes. "Perhaps the four gods don't know either." Malkador's shoulders slumped. "A problem for a future me," he muttered. He and the Emperor were in an impossible position. To save humanity, they had to deal with the chaos gods. It was a race against time. The warp storms had briefly abated, giving them a small window to unite the scattered remnants of humanity. A vast plan like this required the warp's dark consent, and they couldn't afford to break the deal. "Let's go," the Emperor said, rising from the floor. "Time is not on our side." He walked barefoot out of the chamber. "Indeed," Malkador agreed, tossing a glowing sigil at the stone door. It groaned open, flooding the room with blinding sunlight. Outside, a deep voice boomed with barely contained excitement. "My lord, you've returned. Everything went smoothly, I trust." The Emperor and Malkador smiled, nodding. Their grand plan had taken its first critical step. They were greeted by two figures, a giant of a man over 3 meters tall and an elegant woman. The man was a masterpiece of genetic engineering, a walking work of art. His body was clad in golden power armor that was so ornate it seemed alive, with intricate reliefs and countless embedded gems. On his chest, an aquila was cast in metal, wings outstretched. His eyes, full of fierce resolve, perfectly complemented the armor's regal splendor. In his hand, he held a magnificent halberd, a weapon forged by the Emperor himself for the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. The halberd's head was a fearsome bolt gun with a built-in disintegration field, a truly terrifying piece of tech. This was Constantin Valdor, the Emperor's most powerful and loyal servant. Created from the Emperor's own genes, he was designed to be impervious to the warp and a master of combat. He and his custodian brothers were the pinnacle of physical perfection, faster than lightning and capable of fighting for days without rest. The woman was Erda, a fellow perpetual and the Emperor's oldest friend. She had watched human civilization rise from its infancy and had been a silent guardian throughout history. She had helped the Emperor with the Unification Wars, offering strategic advice and her profound wisdom. The two were the foundation of the nascent Imperium. The Emperor trusted them implicitly, and they, in turn, were dedicated to his grand vision, a galaxy-spanning Imperium of man. "Let's go, my servants," the Emperor said, holding out the souls in his hand. "To the laboratory. We must anchor these in reality immediately. They won't last long without a vessel." Chapter 8 Primarchs. The impure, otherworldly beings of the warp shimmered in Valdor's golden gaze, and a flash of pure, unadulterated revulsion crossed his face. He instinctively gripped his halberd tighter, a silent promise to himself to pulverize the cosmic abominations if they so much as twitched. Duty-bound, he gave a solemn nod and turned, leading the way with a stiff back. He never stopped scanning the periphery, his senses on high alert, ready to strike and utterly obliterate the warp creatures at a moment's notice. "I can't let your efforts be in vain." Erda barely glanced at the souls of the demigods before turning away. Her kind, the Perpetuals, were immortal, capable of resurrecting from death. But even they had their limits, and she knew from eons of experience that the warp was a poison that seeped into everything. The group walked in silence to a stone elevator that took them deep underground. The doors opened to a different world. The space had been hollowed out, a testament to an impossible feat of engineering. The ceiling was a chaotic tangle of pipes and cables, a web so complex it looked like it was designed by a mad spider. The floor was a mosaic of gray stone slabs, crisscrossed by more conduits. Researchers in long robes moved through the lab like worker ants, calibrating machines and fine-tuning equipment. In the very center of the immense space stood the main event, a series of immense gestation pods. All the tangled wires and chaotic pipelines in the laboratory seemed to converge on these pods. "My lord, everything is ready according to your instructions." A woman with flaxen hair and a tired but determined face stepped forward, kneeling before the emperor. She held out a data panel, her hands trembling slightly with reverence. Her name was Astartes, the chief gene artificer. The emperor took the panel and a flood of information poured into his mind. Everything was perfect. The emperor's psychic will gently lifted her. He remembered every contribution she had made. "You may leave," the emperor said, his voice a low hum. His will, however, was relayed by Valdor's deep, resounding voice. "You need not participate in what comes next. Thank you for your contributions. The sweat you shed is your immortal metal." Everyone fell to their knees. Tears streamed down their faces as they looked up at the emperor, a man so holy that to look directly upon him was to risk blindness. They cried and worshipped, their excitement barely contained. For a chance to stand in his light, they would have happily given their sight, but they obeyed his command. "Everyone, please leave quickly," Erda said, her own voice thick with emotion. She was deeply moved by their sacrifice. "We still have critical tasks to attend to, and we must make every second count." The staff, wiping away tears, rose and left in an orderly fashion, their heads bowed low. They held back the urge to kneel, suppressing their awe with every step. "Begin." When only 4 people remained, the emperor reached out and took Erda's hand. A hazy glow enveloped them as they walked together toward the pods, like 2 lovers embarking on an ancient rite. The primarchs, the emperor's greatest project, were an essential part of his plan. Without them, there was no hope for humanity. He had looked out at the galaxy and felt a profound sense of powerlessness. The cosmos was too vast, and humanity was too scattered. Normal soldiers were simply too fragile for a project of this scale. The Custodes, his personal army, were perfect. They were the pinnacle of bioalchemy, unique and irreplicable works of art. But they were also outrageously expensive. The Emperor's accumulated wealth had been completely spent just on Valdor's armor. Constantin Valdor once asked Malkador, "If we are the Emperor's most loyal and powerful warriors, why not use us to conquer the stars?" Malkador simply looked at the stars and said, "Then the empire the Emperor builds would consist only of the Custodes." He was talking about money, of course. The resources to build a legion of them would have bankrupted the entire Imperium. "We can't just sail rowboats across light years to conquer worlds, can we?" Valdor, a living god of war, paused for a millisecond, a long time in custodian terms. He sighed and shook his head, the truth dawning on him. The Emperor's deal with the warp was not just for the 20 demigod souls. It was for the forbidden knowledge that came with them. He would use that knowledge, combine the warp and reality, and create a new kind of life. He raised his hands, and a shimmering, golden psychic energy erupted from his fingertips. "My friend," he said, turning to Erda, his voice filled with a rare excitement. "It is time for us to contribute our genetic material." Erda nodded, her eyes closed tightly as she lay down on a sealed platform. Probes of pure light extracted genetic material from her body, causing her to instinctively tense with pain. The Emperor took a ceremonial dagger from Valdor and drew it across his palm. A single, gem-red drop of blood welled up. Valdor flinched and turned away, sickened by the sight. He couldn't shake the unsettling feeling of it all. The purest being in the mortal universe, shedding his blood to combine with the most foul creatures of the warp. The Emperor's blood, imbued with his immense psychic power, floated into each of the gestation pods, combining with Erda's genes and the demigod souls. He chanted softly, a golden light glowing from his eyes as he bestowed upon them the greatest parts of his essence. Idealism, rationality, gentleness, responsibility, kindness, humility, justice, tolerance, courage, beauty, holiness, persistence, resilience, patience. But the emperor was human, and his essence also contained the ugly parts of humanity: ambition, a desire for conquest, sorrow, and hatred. He did not remove these. He knew that for the primarchs to truly understand humanity, they had to be a reflection of it, flaws and all. Each primarch would be a perfect blend of warped demigod and human, a being of immense power and full of humanity. They would fulfill their destiny, whether it was to rule, conquer, or guard the universe's darkest secrets. Chapter 9: Erda. The primarchs, these miraculous beings forged from the very fabric of the warp and the pinnacle of human technology, were now infused with the essence of the master of mankind. He was giving them his blood, his genetic material, and more importantly, his ideals. He was literally building his children from the ground up, with a little help from the gods. With a gentle wave of his hand, the emperor grabbed a small bottle of dark red fluid. The label read, "Ancient Terra Genetic Sample." With a final flourish of psychic energy, he infused it into one of the primarch's pods, hoping to bestow upon him the eternal loyalty of a very good boy. He paused for a moment, his gaze falling on the last red soul, the one he had no control over. He hesitated. What exactly was this thing? The gods had forced it on him, yet its light was pure, unlike anything from the warp he had ever seen. He stared at the pod for a long time, then with a weary sigh he spoke. "I cannot bestow anything upon you. You are free." With that, the ritual was complete. The warp sorcery and the biological pods all activated at once. The combined genetic material of the Emperor and Erda fused, and pure warp energy, channeled by the Emperor's barrier, rushed into the pods. Nurtured by the artificial amniotic fluid and the roiling chaos, 21 tiny human embryos began to take shape. Lesser gods and a supreme human fused, creating the ultimate combination of power and wisdom. Erda slowly climbed out of the pod, her legs wobbly and her body weak. The pain of the genetic extraction was an all-consuming fire, like having 1,000,000 tiny nanobots prick every cell in her body. She waved away Malkador's hand, refusing his support. Her eyes, filled with a newfound tenderness, took in the 22 fetuses in their pods, curled together in the fluid. She had been immortal for tens of thousands of years, a silent spectator to human history, but she had never felt a bond like this. Now, for the first time, her heart pounded in sync with the tiny, faint heartbeats in the pods. A long-suppressed maternal instinct surged through her ancient veins. Her smile was weak, but full of a gentle, loving warmth. "My friend, are you feeling better?" the Emperor asked, his own face a shade paler than before, his divine energy temporarily depleted. "I'm well, I've never been better," she replied, a genuine light in her eyes that Malkador, who rarely smiled, couldn't help but notice. "Perhaps your new identity will bring you a different experience," he said, and Erda simply smiled. The Emperor's gaze pierced through the pods. The little primarchs were developing at an astonishing rate. It wouldn't be long before he could extract the gene seed, a process that would allow humanity to create superhuman soldiers by implanting this divine human genetic material into carefully selected mortals. "Let's go, they need time and so do we," the Emperor said. The four of them turned and walked away from the heavy alloy door, sealing the laboratory and all its secrets forever from the prying eyes of ordinary humans. Erda stopped before the final exit, her heart heavy with concern. She looked back, but all she could see were the cold, unforgiving doors that separated her from her children. Outside, a crowd of staff waited, a sea of solemn faces. The custodes, the Imperium's early officials, the soldiers who had helped the Emperor conquer Terra, all stood in reverent silence. To each of them, the master of mankind appeared differently, a perfect reflection of their deepest desires. He was a perfect embodiment of their ideals, his image changing depending on who was looking. He didn't stop this psychic projection. In fact, he amplified it. He knew that deep in their DNA, humans were wired for worship. "My lord," a voice called out, and suddenly the entire crowd dropped to their knees, offering their loyalty and praise. The wave of overwhelming emotion was too much. Erda felt a sudden wave of dizziness. "I need to rest," she said softly, not asking for permission but stating a simple fact. The Emperor nodded, and she left with her personal handmaidens. As she stepped out of the Emperor's light and walked away from his psychic protection, a thin tendril of chaos energy, so subtle it was almost imperceptible, slipped into her soul. A jolt of cold, soul-chilling dread shot through her. She leaned against a wall, struggling to catch her breath. "Madam, are you all right?" a handmaiden asked, stepping forward to offer support. The moment their hands touched, the handmaiden recoiled. Her mistress' skin was ice cold. "Madam, your body." Erda quickly recovered and waved a hand, silencing her. "I'm sorry to worry you. I am just a little weak. Please take care of yourself. The Imperium cannot lose you." After reassuring them, she continued on to her luxurious estate, a small oasis of greenery in the ravaged wasteland of Terra. The courtyard, with its artificial fountain and fragrant flowers, was a luxury beyond the wildest dreams of the wasteland scavengers outside. In her private study, surrounded by ancient books, she lay down on a comfortable chair. She closed her eyes, the simulated sunlight from the fusion device warming her face. A chilling vision flashed in her mind. A cruel, terrifying prophecy of a future she refused to believe. The Emperor would turn her children into mindless weapons, use them for his own ambition, and then, once they were no longer useful, he would erase them from history. She knew this was a trick, a cruel joke from the chaos gods, a lie meant to turn her against him. But a new emotion, an overwhelming maternal worry, was now battling her millennia of reason. What if he was lying? What if he truly was going to use her children and then toss them away like broken tools? Chapter 10. Worry. Trust once broken festers. And in the case of Erda, the gods had found the perfect fertilizer for their insidious plan. Every time she closed her eyes, the seeds of doubt they had planted would sprout, nourished by her fears and anxieties, until they grew into a thick, tangled forest of mistrust. Each night was a waking nightmare. She was plagued by a relentless storm of visions and illusions, a constant assault on her sanity. She knew it was the warp at work, but the constant torment was slowly grinding down her will. The whispers of a dark power began to influence her subconscious, showing her countless dark futures. She saw the master of mankind, not as a savior, but as the ruthless warlord he truly was. She saw his vow to save humanity as a mask for his real ambition, to conquer and enslave. The young primarchs, her sons, were not champions but terrifying killing machines, crafted solely to fulfill their father's will. In these visions, they turned their weapons on humanity, harvesting souls to fuel the Emperor's ultimate ascension to godhood. In another vision, a different kind of horror unfolded. After the unification, the master of mankind would betray his own sons, purging the primarchs and their legions. The galaxy would burn as father and sons turned on each other, brothers butchering brothers, a war so horrific it would sever the future of the human race forever. The kaleidoscope of possibilities twisted and tore at Erda's soul. She was a lone ship caught in a maelstrom. She knew that simply speaking with the Emperor could clear her mind, but the images were so vivid, so visceral, she couldn't bring herself to face him. What if they were true? What if this wasn't a lie? She buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. In her dreams, she saw the tragic scenes play out, a symphony of familial betrayal and murder. She cried out, a silent scream of agony as she tried to change the outcome, but a cruel whisper in the darkness mocked her. "You can do nothing. Their fate is already sealed. The gods will savor their sweet corruption." "No," Erda shrieked, snapping her eyes open. She sat up, drenched in a cold sweat, desperate to refute the voice. She looked around, finding herself in the familiar safety of her room, but the fear lingered. A maid, standing by the door, looked at her with concern. "Madam, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Erda managed, a weak smile on her face. "You may go." The maid bowed and left, leaving Erda alone once more in the suffocating silence. She lay back, exhausted, replaying the dark visions. She knew they were lies, a cruel trick of the gods, but a mother's heart is not governed by logic. She had to act. She had to save her sons. Days passed, and the nightmares continued. Erda's face became a map of her torment, her once glowing golden hair now dull and lifeless. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes sunken, her lips cracked and bleeding. She stumbled out of bed, called for a maid to help her dress, and muttered to herself, "I have to go. I can still stop it." The gods had shown her the way. Before everything came to pass, she had to get the primarchs away from the master of mankind. Erda rushed down the long corridor and into the stone elevator, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The elevator groaned, descending into the belly of the earth. She leaned against the cold stone wall, her mind racing. She knew this journey. In her nightmares, she had taken this same elevator, a descent into darkness that led only to betrayal. When the elevator doors opened, a small squad of the Emperor's loyalists was waiting. Valdor, the Captain General, stood at the front, one hand on his power halberd, the other on his hip, his eyes scanning for threats. Erda's arrival had not been on the schedule. Upon recognizing her, Valdor relaxed his posture and gestured her inside. The Emperor had given Erda free passage to this lab, and for a custodian, that was all the permission he needed. "Madam, you don't look well," Valdor said, a hint of concern in his deep voice. "Perhaps you'd like me to kill you." Erda blinked. "Captain General, what?" "It would reset your physical and mental state. You'd be good as new," he said, as if suggesting a nice, warm bath. Valdor's loyalty was absolute, and he would do anything to serve the Emperor and his allies, even if his methods were unorthodox. "I appreciate the offer, Captain General, but I'd rather not. I prefer to kill myself," Erda replied calmly, which was an even stranger thing to say. Valdor shrugged, the plates of his ornate armor shifting with a soft, metallic groan. "That's a shame. I'd very much like to help you with that." Malkador, who was standing nearby, let out a dry, rattling laugh. But the moment was broken by the Emperor's voice. "Constantin Valdor," the Emperor boomed. The Captain General snapped to attention. At the Emperor's command, Valdor walked over to the pods and began to extract the gene seed. Inside the pods, the primarchs had grown into infants. Mechanical tentacles gently extended, inserting into their spines and drawing out the precious genetic material. The infants thrashed in agony, their chubby limbs flailing in an attempt to escape, but their cries were silent in the amniotic fluid. The Emperor frowned slightly, and with a golden psychic ropes bound the primarchs to the walls of the pods, immobilizing them. He then gave Valdor a silent order to continue. Erda's heart was in her throat. She felt every spike of pain in her own soul, as if a sharp knife were twisting in her. And their father, their supposed protector, stood there expressionless, seemingly unmoved. The fragmented illusions from the warp began to resurface. The Chaos Gods, unable to breach the Emperor's powerful psychic barrier, were attacking from within, twisting everything she saw. She hallucinated that Malkador was smiling cruelly, enjoying her son's suffering, and that Valdor, who she knew would one day betray the Emperor's Thunder Warriors, was just waiting for the right moment to kill her children, too. "No," Erda cried out, a new resolve hardening her heart. Her nightmares were not just nightmares, they were prophecies. The time for caution was over. She would take her sons, and she would save them all. She would get them away from this. Deep in the warp, Tzeentch threw his head back and laughed, a shrill, triumphant cackle that echoed through his crystal labyrinth. He had done it. The loom of fate was turning, and he had added new threads. The beginning of their stories should not be so predictable. They should be full of variables. He stopped laughing, his constantly shifting form coming to rest for a moment. He peered at the 21st Primarch, still sleeping peacefully in his pod. "And you, outsider," the Chaos God whispered, "what kind of surprise will you bring me?" He was ready to sit back and watch the chaos unfold. Chapter 11, Gene Seed. "My lady, how are you feeling?" Malkador's gentle voice broke through the storm in Erda's mind. He looked every bit the concerned old gentleman, as if he hadn't just witnessed the brutal extraction of her children's very essence. The contrast was a slap to her face. Hatred churned within her, a silent, boiling rage. She wanted to rip off his pious mask and scream at him, but decades of self-control held her perfectly still. Not a single muscle in her face twitched. Her plan had to work. "I apologize, Malkador," she said, giving a slow, deliberate curtsy. "I'm not feeling well." "My lady, there's no need to apologize. You're free to leave at any time." Malkador quickly stepped forward, a polite hand extended, ready to guide her out. "Truly, I apologize," Erda insisted, bowing her head again with an exaggerated solemnity before turning to go. Her unusual, almost theatrical behavior raised a red flag. Without a word, Malkador motioned to the custodians. The two giants flanking Erda stiffened imperceptibly. A silent psychic command from Malkador echoed in their minds: "You don't need to return. Continue to monitor her." The custodians nodded slightly, tightening their grip on their halberds. Any sudden, unplanned move from the woman would be her last. The Emperor, however, was oblivious. He was too consumed by the task at hand, his will still engaged in a cosmic wrestling match with the chaos gods. The gods, perhaps bored once Erda was gone, stopped prying at his psychic barrier. His attention was now fully on the results of the extraction. "My lord," Valdor's deep voice boomed. He held up a transparent box, inside which floated 21 cylindrical glass containers. The contents were a deep, unsettling blood red. The Emperor rarely showed emotion, but he frowned at the sight. Everything the warp touched was twisted. Even with his divine genes, the material was still tainted. But then his gaze fell on the final container. A splash of pristine crimson made him pause. "Oh," he said softly, "which primarch is this?" "Number 21, Valdor replied. The Emperor carefully lifted the container with his psychic power. He saw no warp corruption, no swirling chaos, just a pure, vibrant red. "Incredible," he muttered. "It has the essence of the warp, but none of its taint. It perfectly integrates the warp's power and our genes." With a gentle tap, the glass shattered. The red essence floated in his palm, pulsing with a serene light. "Truly perfect," the Emperor said, a rare smile gracing his face. "Valdor, you are my subjective perfection, a reflection of my ideal. But this is an objective perfection, the kind I have always yearned for." Valdor, who had been listening intently, tilted his head, his face a mask of confusion. Another kind of perfection? It was like someone had just told him a custodians could get a cold. "Is it safe? Is it stable?" Malkador said, his hood pushed back, his dark eyes reflecting the crimson light. Safety and stability were what truly mattered. "I don't know, old friend," the Emperor admitted, his expression complex. He lifted the material and looked at the child still sleeping peacefully in cultivation tank number 21. "He might be a gift box, and even the four gods have no idea what's inside." "Then you should make good use of it," Malkador said, a rare, gentle smile on his face. "The others, well, they don't seem very easy to get along with." The trio then proceeded to a much larger cavern. The Emperor's right hand, which still held the perfect genetic material, made Valdor a little jealous. In this new lab, a small army of scientists, led by the tireless Astartes, was preparing to cultivate the gene seeds into the 19 organs needed to create a superhuman warrior. "What shall we call these new soldiers?" Malkador asked, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Stardust Crusaders," Valdor suggested, as he admired the golden eagles on his armor. "It's got a ring to it." The Emperor simply shook his head, a stern expression on his face. "Death Angels," he sighed, the words heavy with a somber gravity. He knew the path ahead was dark and unforgiving. The new warriors would bring death and destruction to the stars, but also salvation to the scattered fragments of humanity. "That's a good name," Valdor said, stroking his chin. "At least it's cool." Malkador suppressed a twitch at the corner of his mouth. Valdor's sense of humor was pitifully scarce. But the Emperor was no longer listening. He saw Astartes working tirelessly. He thought about her last name, Astartes. It was a quiet, unassuming name, a symbol of the selflessness of those who toiled in the shadows. A romance began to form in his mind. The new warriors, who would one day conquer the galaxy, would bear the name of the scientist who helped bring them to life. They would ascend to the galactic stage, carrying the hopes of ordinary mortals. Chapter 12 Traitor. Erda hurried, quickly leaving the laboratory, with the custodians following closely behind her. Somewhat surprised by Malkador's perceptiveness, Erda didn't take the two custodians to heart. She had to quickly return to her residence and execute the next step of her plan. You may withdraw, I am safe now. Stopping at the courtyard gate, Erda dismissed the custodians, making a final effort despite its unlikelihood. The custodians stood there, as if they hadn't heard the order, unmoving and with no intention of leaving. Out of respect for the Emperor's friend, one of them explained, a clear and passionate voice coming from beneath his helmet. "Madam, we are instructed by Malkador to ensure your personal safety." "Then I shall trouble you," Erda said, shaking her head as she walked into the courtyard. The two custodians stood rigidly at the courtyard entrance, facing inward, showing no signs of protection. They claimed to be protecting, but were in fact monitoring. Without dwelling too much on the custodians' excessive persistence, Erda returned to her room, dismissed the waiting handmaidens, and lay quietly on her bed. She opened a hidden compartment in the headboard, took out a silver dagger, gripped it tightly with both hands, and slowly plunged it into her chest. With the plan set, Erda had to restore her energy in the fastest way possible. She didn't have much time left. As blood flowed, the dark red silk quilt, embroidered with golden patterns, deepened in color, and Erda's breathing gradually steadied, as she peacefully died on the magnificent bed like a sleeping beauty. She was accustomed to death, her consciousness completely plunged into darkness, but in just one day her immortal physique would fully regenerate, healing all physical injuries. The custodians stood like statues at the courtyard entrance. Their protected subject had not appeared in their sight for a long time, and there were no threats approaching. The Emperor's custodians greatly enjoyed standing guard. They only needed to stand there. Although the custodians possessed extraordinary combat capabilities, combat was not their essence. Every custodian was a unique talent, reaching the pinnacle of human achievement in both specialized fields and common skills. Perhaps the two standing guard with their long halberds. One was a top chef among humans, and the other a top shoemaker who could say. Combat, in a way, was an additional benefit brought by the custodian's superhuman physique. A white arm pushed open a window. The custodians noticed it was their protected subject's arm. A gentle breeze swept past, and the superhuman senses granted by their enhanced physique detected an anomaly. The custodian's nostrils flared slightly, keenly catching the faint scent of blood carried by the breeze wafting through the window. No words were needed, no superfluous actions. The two custodians' guards immediately charged into the courtyard, their figures like lightning crashing through. The marble path was shattered by their armored boots, and the handmaidens shrieked, covering their heads, scrambling to avoid the custodians' towering forms. "Stand back!" The custodian's guard's voice boomed like thunder. He held his power halberd with both hands, aiming it at the bedroom door. The bolter mounted beneath the halberd was pointed directly at the door, and his right index finger was already on the halberd's trigger. With a light squeeze of the trigger, the bolter's large-caliber explosive rounds would instantly tear through the mahogany door. The two handmaidens guarding Erda's bedroom door were stunned, frozen in place, not daring to move. Startled awake by the custodian's roar, they stood there, pale and rigid. The custodians had no time to mind the handmaidens. Their armor rose and fell with their breathing, emitting a faint rubbing sound. Their hearts beat strong and powerfully, and their blood flow accelerated, instantly putting the custodians into combat mode. They were somewhat tense. In the Emperor's territory at the foot of the Himalayas, what method had the assassin behind the door used to infiltrate, evade the custodian's gaze, and complete the assassination silently? The fact that Erda was an immortal was not a great secret among the custodians, but for security reasons, it was not known to everyone. Techno-warlord, techno-barbarian, who could it be? Footsteps behind the door slowly approached, calm and even, showing no signs of panic, even preparing to come out and face the custodians directly. The two custodians, with perfect tacit agreement, subtly stepped back. Close quarters were not suitable for halberd swings, and they waited solemnly for the person behind the door to reveal themselves. "Custodians, you need not be tense." Erda's voice came from behind the door. She gently pushed it open and helped up her personal handmaiden who had collapsed, elegant and composed, completely devoid of the fragmented appearance from the day before. She had been reborn, in a state better than ever before. Seeing Erda safe and sound, the Custodes breathed a sigh of relief. They discreetly overlooked the source of the bloody smell in the room, and instead, somewhat surprised, asked, "Madam, are you preparing to go out?" Erda was not wearing her usual silk court robe, but had changed into a military uniform. A black, lightweight, form-fitting combat suit tightly enveloped Erda, perfectly outlining her figure. The insignia marking her identity and rank on her shoulders and upper arms had long been removed. A tactical belt hung at her waist, with a dagger tucked into it, and a strange pistol of an unknown model. Despite the seemingly simple tactical attire, the Custodes dared not underestimate it in the slightest. Clearly, this set of tactical equipment came from humanity's most glorious golden age, an era now referred to as the Dark Age of technology. That great and brilliant era, beneath the thick dust of history, buried too many secrets dark and mysterious. "Yes, I need to go out, and I require your escort and protection." Erda smiled slightly, directly informing them of her travel plans and inviting the Custodes to accompany her. Erda knew very well that she couldn't shake off the Custodes, so she decided to turn the tables, using them to achieve her goals and gain an extra layer of security. "We are greatly honored to accompany you. As the journey will be quite long, please call me Achilles, madam. This is my colleague, Claudius Ptolemy." The Custodes introduced themselves, bearing names shared with great heroes and scholars of old Terra. Custodes candidates were selected from infancy. Their original names had long been discarded or forgotten. The Emperor would give them new names, usually those of great heroes from old Terra. Hearing the names of heroes, Erda felt an even greater aversion to the Emperor's twisted sense of humor. She quickened her pace, leaving the courtyard, wanting to depart from there as soon as possible. Achilles followed closely behind Erda, while Ptolemy went to prepare 3 hoverbikes. The 3 rode anti-gravity hoverbikes, leaving the Himalayan mountain range and continuing onward until they were beyond the sphere of the Emperor's control. "Madam, could you tell me our destination for this journey?" The 2 Custodes, leaning over their flying bikes, flanked Erda in the middle. Achilles, seeing that they were already far from the Emperor and still no destination in sight, inquired about it through his comm helmet. "A secret base." "Understood, madam." The 3 traveled in silence. After a long journey, they finally arrived at their destination. Terra's ecosystem had been completely destroyed. During the warlord conflicts, nuclear bombs were exchanged, mountains were leveled, and now only yellow sand and wasteland remained. Only those resilient, deadly creatures survived in the harsh environment, lurking in the endless desert. Erda led the Custodes through the constantly shifting sand sea, finally arriving at her destination, her private base. Entering an underground base, successfully passing through the still-operating security system, the 3 arrived deep within the secret base, where the things Erda needed were stored. "Madam, please allow me to do it." Seemingly asking for permission, Achilles, however, preempted her, snatching a box before Erda could, holding it in his arms with no intention of handing it over to her. Erda's heart was filled with indignation at the custodians' rude actions. Of course, she knew the custodians were wary of her, those extremely rude bastards who trusted no one. "Of course, you can even open it. It's just an ancient gift from an old friend," Erda replied easily, suppressing her anger, a generous smile on her fair face. Ptolemy subtly stepped back, standing at the optimal distance, ready to support his teammates or kill Erda at any moment. Achilles was drawn to the object in the box and sighed softly. "So it's this, an ancient religious scripture of mankind." The box had a built-in stasis field, which could freeze time, thus preserving precious items for a long time. An ancient paper Bible lay quietly inside, its cover adorned with a coiled black snake, a golden rose brooch pinned at the snake's head. Protected by the stasis field, the book was as good as new, showing no trace of time. "Madam," Achilles' voice held a hint of warning, Madam Erda, you should know that the Emperor dislikes these books very much. They are destined to turn to ashes in my lord's future plans. The Emperor planned to overthrow all religions, break all superstitions, burn all religious books, and liberate mankind's minds from faith. Of course, I know, but not now, right? Erda nodded slightly, without much explanation, and extended her hand, signaling the custodians to return the book. Achilles inspected it and found no anomalies. When he closed the pages, the coiled serpent's crimson eyes on the cover made him feel a sense of unease. It's rare for a snake to be on a Bible cover. The black snake deceived Eve, symbolizing betrayal. The custodians were always learned. Achilles calmly commented on those fables, and his seemingly simple words instantly tensed the atmosphere in the underground base. Betrayal, at this moment, it was undoubtedly an extremely sensitive word. Her brow furrowed, and a hint of anger rose on her face. Erda rebuked Achilles. "Custodians, watch your words." "Respected madam," Achilles lowered his head, the red plume on his golden helmet swaying. "I am not doubting you." HMPH, with a light snort suppressing the tremor deep in her eyes, Erda secretly let out a long breath. When the custodians uttered betrayal, revealing her inner thoughts in that instant, Erda's emotions shifted slightly, and even that minute change did not escape the custodian's keen eyes. Fortunately, in an instant, she masked her emotions with feigned anger, escaping Achilles' probing. The custodian's strength was not just physical, their minds were equally powerful. By observing the target's imperceptible physiological changes, such as slight pupil dilation or constriction, they could discern lies or truth. Lie detection was one of their most basic skills. A seemingly casual remark contained extremely dangerous probing, like a blade held to the throat. Achilles' voice was full of apology, but there was no expression on his face hidden beneath the helmet. After confirming there were no problems, he presented the book to Erda. Erda took the book with a grim expression and turned her back, leaving the cramped and tense environment of the underground base. A deceptive ancient book successfully diverted the custodian's attention, and Erda easily retrieved what she needed. Her slender fingers gently caressed the book's surface, brushing over the rose brooch as if dusting it off. All her actions appeared logical, reasonable, and normal to the custodians. After confirming the book was fine, she placed it in her personal bag. Little did they know that these seemingly reasonable actions had activated certain ancient technological artifacts in the secret underground chamber. After the three left, deep within the secret base, several pairs of mechanical electronic eyes glowed blood red, activating from slumber and entering a standby state. With the item in hand, the three immediately set off, rushing back to the Himalayas. Terra was very unsafe, with warlords rising and princes warring. Since the 25th millennium, warp storms gradually raged, and violent storms blocked mankind's passage to the stars. Human genetic mutations surged, with a large number of psychers appearing, leading to increased social unrest. Coupled with the rebellion of intelligent machines, mankind entered an era of chaos and despair. That dark past has not yet dissipated, and mankind struggles in mutual strife. The mother planet that birthed mankind, the smoke of war never cleared, her land was scarred, and traces of war were visible everywhere. The Emperor stepped onto the stage, determined to end mankind's internal conflicts and reunite mankind. The nascent Imperium was still unfledged, yet everywhere he looked there were enemies. America, Albion, the Pan-Pacific Empire, the Caucasian wastelands, the Franks, Ursh, powerful techno-barbarians, and sorcerous tyrants who wielded arcane arts. The Emperor dispatched his army, the savage Thunder Warriors. They campaigned in his name, fighting all hostile forces on Terra to achieve the goal of unification. Returning to her residence, Erda casually placed the Bible back on the bookshelf. The book was a decoy. The brooch was the real item she had retrieved. Sitting back at her desk, she gently stroked the rose brooch, then pricked her finger with the pin to confirm the user's DNA. and relic from the dark age of technology, a precious technological artifact that could be used to open a dimensional rift to store items. A faint blue light flickered, and a dimensional rift opened in the void before Erda, from which a wooden box and a golden ring emerged. Inside the box lay a bronze dagger, ancient and simple in design, a product of Terra's feudal era. The unadorned golden ring, a brilliant disguise, would not lead anyone to associate it with the Golden Age, yet it concealed cutting-edge temporal technology. Shedding her combat uniform, she changed back into her usual silk robe, lowering her perceived threat. With the brooch pinned to her chest, the golden ring on her finger, and the dagger concealed, Erda's eyes were resolute as she walked out of the bedroom and headed to the Emperor's laboratory. The Emperor's laboratory was located deep within the foothills of the Himalayas, Terra's only surviving mountain range. 12 custodian guards led several squads of first-generation modified warriors, the Thunder Warriors, to protect the laboratory entrance. Around them were also a large number of mortal troops, as well as various anti-aircraft firepower and heavy war machines. Erda, as always, appeared relaxed, a gentle smile on her face, and approached with graceful steps. Achilles and Ptolemy were 3 paces behind her dutifully. As the Emperor's close friend and minister of the interior, often standing by the Emperor's side in public, most people in the Imperium knew Erda, the gentle woman who stood beside the master of mankind. She did not need any passes or identification. By virtue of her prestige and the Emperor's trust, she could freely enter and exit the most confidential areas. Now, Erda was enveloped in shadow, as a large hand encased in metal armor blocked her path. She stopped, somewhat surprised, and looked up to see a fierce warrior, helmeted but with his nose and mouth exposed, blocking her way. Erda's pupils constricted. The Emperor's first-generation modified warriors, the flawed products soon to be replaced, were blocking her path. "You are no longer permitted to enter here, madam." The warrior's voice was cruel as he spoke slowly. His tall body obscured the light, his limbs were thick, and the muscles bulging abnormally from the armor's gaps. His voice was hoarse and low, with a hint of hostility in his words. "Soldier," Erda's face darkened, her gentleness gone, replaced by contempt, "who gave you permission to stand before me and stop me?" "Thunder Warriors." Terra trembled beneath their feet. They destroyed one city-state after another, delivering victory after victory to the Emperor. These warriors were the Emperor's heavy hammer, crude and filled with violence, utterly savage, with brutality flowing in their blood, and only slaughter and destruction in their minds. Erda disdained them, utterly contemptuous of the Thunder Warriors' achievements and glory. When the Thunder Warriors breached city-states, countless brilliant achievements and technologies from the Golden Age were destroyed along with them. Knowledge and mankind's former civilization were trampled. Beyond this, Erda knew the Thunder Warriors' fate. They had no future. To conquer Terra as quickly as possible, the Emperor urgently created the Thunder Warriors. While powerful, they were extremely unstable, short-lived, mentally unstable, and often suffered from genetic diseases. The Emperor already had a plan. After the new generation of soldiers was born, the Thunder Warriors would be secretly purged. The outside world would know that they died during the unification of Terra, living on in songs of praise. "Tell me, soldier, how can you stand in my way, disrespecting me so?" "Madam, I respect you." The Thunder Warrior lowered his head and knelt on one knee, tightening his body as much as possible so that the lady before him would not have to look up too much. "We were ordered not to let you pass." "Whose orders do you obey?" "Madam, there's no need to trouble him. We are guided by Malkador and obey the Emperor's will." The Emperor's custodian, clad in golden armor, emerged from behind the Thunder Warrior, and a single sentence answered all of Erda's questions. "Malkador?" Erda's golden brows subtly arched, secretly admiring Malkador's keenness and wisdom. That hunched old fox was quite annoying and troublesome. At the same time, she understood that Malkador was wary, but didn't know exactly what she intended to do. HMPH? Erda let out a cold laugh. The Holy Lady was utterly merciless now, calculating her chances of forcibly entering the laboratory. 12 custodians, several squads of thunder warriors, and countless mortals. Malkador had truly gone to great lengths, arranging such a large formation for a mere hint of suspicion. Too bad you can't stop me. The custodians, hearing this, did not hesitate. Their power glaives slashed through the short distance and stopped at Erda's neck. Then they questioned if they had misheard. "Madam, what did you say?" A chill came from behind. Achilles and Ptolemy struck decisively. The glaives had not yet activated their dismemberment fields, their polished blades cut through the air, utterly calm, without any sound. 3 glaives held Erda in the middle, their gleaming blades reflecting her fair, jade-like neck, a trickle of blood slowly running along the blade, warning Erda not to act rashly. The surrounding thunder warriors had not even clearly seen the custodians' movements. A cold glint of blades cutting through the air flashed in their eyes. In less than a few milliseconds, the custodians completed a series of actions, bringing Erda under control. Exclamations rose one after another. The thunder warriors couldn't help but exclaim, marveling at the custodian's power. Erda smiled coldly, paying no heed to the custodian's warning. Her hands, clasped over her lower abdomen, subtly pressed a mechanism with her fingers. The golden ring emitted an invisible shockwave. "A creation from the Golden Age will tear you apart, custodians." No sooner had she spoken than the 3 custodians bore the brunt. The moment they realized something was wrong, they swung their glaives at Erda, only to find their bodies couldn't keep up with their reactive thoughts. Their bodies felt as if trapped in a swamp, unable to move. The surrounding air became viscous. A translucent, semicircular barrier erupted with Erda as its origin, enveloping a 30-meter radius around her. Temporal weapon. The custodians were well informed, having read extensively in the Emperor's library, and immediately knew what was happening. The temporal field adjusts the flow of time within a certain range, accelerating or decelerating all creatures except the user, allowing for effective escape or other counteractions. Achilles struggled, swinging his spear with his last strength, intending to cut off Erda's head, and warned, "Madam, your actions will enrage the Emperor. Surrender immediately." The temporal field gradually intensified, and the Captain General of the Adeptus Custod's movements slowly became sluggish until his body was completely frozen within the temporal field. The ultimate life forms created by bioalchemy were powerless before the might of time. The surrounding guards noticed that something was wrong, and the other Captain General of the Adeptus Custods immediately fired their bolt guns, which were mounted on their halberds. The large-caliber self-propelled bolt shells contacted the transparent field, immediately slowing down, flying towards Erda at an extremely slow speed. "A temporal weapon, a relic from the dark age of technology," the Captain General of the Adeptus Custods growled, surprised. In milliseconds, his mind conceived a countermeasure. His voice, amplified through his helmet's internal speaker, reached the guards' ears. "Mortal soldiers, full firepower. Although temporal weapons are powerful, they are not unbreakable. The temporal stasis field requires a large amount of energy to maintain. The temporal field disrupts the flow of time, scrambling the time flow of all living beings or objects within the field. The more matter inside the field, the greater the energy requirement. In a short period, a large number of active objects entering the field would overload the temporal field, causing it to fail. Upon receiving the Captain General of the Adeptus Custod's command, the mortal troops aimed various heavy weapons at the center of the area. Immediately, cerulean plasma, orange-red melta rays, and heavy bolter rounds fired in unison, flashing with various lights and impacting the temporal field. Speed and slowness formed a stark contrast. Under the influence of time, an overwhelming barrage accumulated on the outer edge of the temporal field. With a large number of high-speed objects entering, the time flow inside the field became unstable, rippling in waves. If she had no means of escape, after the field overloaded, Erda would be reduced to a pile of bloody fragments by the weapons and ammunition. Erda was not flustered. She was elegant and composed. As the holder of the golden ring, she would not be affected by the temporal field. She used her finger to push away the halberd resting on her neck and pressed the ruby embedded in her rose brooch. The rose brooch on her chest glowed, and the red gem pulsed rhythmically, emitting a signal. Outside the temporal field, the Captain General of the Adeptus Custod's keen observation skills naturally picked up this subtle change. Teleportation beacon, prepare for engagement, the Captain General of the Adeptus Custods roared, continuously issuing orders to the mortals and thunder warriors. Teleportation light flashed within the temporal field. When the light dissipated, the Captain General of the Adeptus Custods, who had been intently watching the field's activity, shouted loudly, completely devoid of his usual nobility and composure. "Mortals, take cover." "Iron Man, men of iron." In a panic, he pushed a nearby mortal into cover and immediately opened his communicator to contact the Captain General of the Adeptus Custods. "Captain General, Erda has forced her way into the laboratory. She is commanding Iron Man to attack us. We need reinforcements." The Captain General of the Adeptus Custods practically screamed, reporting in the shortest possible time. From Erda's action to the call for aid, the entire process took only a few seconds, and the situation on the field rapidly deteriorated, becoming completely uncontrollable. Iron Man, mechanical creations made by humanity in the distant dark age of technology, artificial intelligences designed to protect humanity, were the most powerful military units of that glorious era. When two Iron Man, leading men of iron, teleported to the scene, the Captain General of the Adeptus Custods knew that a single small team could not stop Erda. The Iron Man, collected by the Eternals who had lived through the entire Golden Age, were fully armed and capable of annihilating all breathing creatures present in a short time. The men of iron led by the Iron Man, those abominable creations mimicking Iron Man, were born solely for slaughter, devoid of any reason or mercy. The Iron Man hovered in the air with anti-gravity devices. Their humanoid bodies were extremely tall yet exceptionally elegant. Their bodies, crafted from ancient lost technology, were clad in white light armor. Within their blue mechanical frames, protected by the armor, streaks of light constantly flowed, fulfilling all human fantasies of intelligent life. Following them were the men of iron, inferior imitation machines, created by the Iron Man during the AI rebellion to supplement their firepower. The men of iron had grotesque, rigid faces, and their bodies and limbs resembled humans. Their skeletons were made of dense, refined iron, and their muscles were bundles of conduits and cables. Their limbs were laden with numerous weapons. They stood over 4 meters tall, covered in heavy, pitch-black armor crafted in the Golden Age, with every molecule precisely aligned, providing astonishing defense. They had 2 unknown types of weapons on their shoulders, and multiple weapons mounted on their armored arms. Their right hand had a long, menacing combat claw that shimmered with electricity. Even the Captain General of the Adeptus Custods did not know the specific functions of these relic-grade weapons. However, they recognized one weapon held in the left hand, a rifle-like firearm whose bullets could travel through space and time, hitting their mark every time. Authority confirmed as human Erda. A blue light projected from the Iron Man's face, scanning to confirm the user. The body of the ancient technological construct was not purely mechanical. Its movements were exceptionally graceful, its joints moving as smoothly as human muscles. The Iron Man, like a guardian knight, took Erda's fair hand. "Please give your command." "Destroy this place. I need to enter the laboratory." Erda nodded with satisfaction. These Iron Man and machines were enough to protect her as she entered the laboratory. She elegantly pinched the blade edge with her fingers, gently pushing away the weapon on her neck. "Command confirmed." The synthesized voice of the intelligent machine was cold and merciless, declaring the doom of all enemies present. You cannot betray the Emperor, steward." With the temporal field in disarray, Achilles could finally speak. Facing the Iron Man, his body immobile yet fearless, he angrily denounced, "How can you be so vile and shameful? He trusted you so much." Regret surfaced in both their minds. That rose brooch was so glaring, having been personally given to Erda by the two of them. Just as depicted on the cover of the Bible, the black serpent symbolized deceit and betrayal. The dark serpent had deceived the captain general of the Adeptus Custodes, who were the emperor's eyes and ears. Erda had betrayed her closest friend, the emperor. Erda saw the deep, wrathful, and unwilling eyes beneath his helmet. She sighed deeply without offering any explanation, a hint of sadness creeping into her heart, feeling sorrow for the fate of the captain general of the Adeptus Custodes. The next instant, a shadow flickered. Achilles and Ptolemy were torn in half, their flesh annihilated by a disintegration field that ripped their superhuman bodies into pulp. Under the Iron Man's command, the men of iron attacked. Their red electronic eyes in their steel sockets showed no emotion, and their grappling hands lifted the captain general of the Adeptus Custodes' corpses. The exhilaration of slaughter made the men of iron stretch their bodies, their spiky ribs on their spines becoming even more menacing, and their black steel teeth gleamed with a chilling light. A red flash, scanning the tenacious vitality within the modified human body before it, as plasma flames erupted from its shoulder weapon, utterly obliterating the captain general of the Adeptus Custodes. Erda pressed the ring on her hand again. The temporal field exploded outwards, and the unstable time flow swept across a 100-meter radius, destroying war weapons in the temporal surge. Mortal warriors swept by the time flow showed varying degrees of temporal influence on their bodies. Young bodies now bore extremely aged, twisted, and terrifying faces. The Thunder Warriors fared even worse. Their strong bodies collapsed with a crash. Their unstable organs, under the chaotic time, rapidly aged or regenerated, and the drastic changes caused their already unstable genes to mutate violently. They were covered in blood, muscles burst open, and mutated limbs grew on their bodies. Some even died on the spot from the extreme mutation. "You damned wretch, what exactly have you done?" the Thunder Warriors demanded fiercely, their limbs mutating and organs failing before they collapsed. "Let's go, time is urgent." Erda swept her gaze over them with contempt, sneering as she lifted her skirt and quickly left under the Iron Man's protection, amidst the Thunder Warriors' curses. As expendable Thunder Warriors, Erda felt that even a glance at them was a gift. The Iron Man split into two groups. One Iron Man protected Erda as she headed to the laboratory, while the other remained to fight the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. As the aftershocks of the temporal field dissipated, the men of iron at the Iron Man's signal lunged at the humans, engaging in highly efficient slaughter. The men of iron took advantage of the human confusion, their mechanical limbs moving rapidly as they strode into the defensive positions. Their underarm-ranged weapons fired several rounds indiscriminately into empty space. The bullets traversed dimensions, returning to the battlefield to pierce the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes' armor and their flesh. The creations of the dark age of technology had a hit rate of 120%. Bullets traveled between temporal dimensions, ultimately hitting their enemies. One Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes was unfortunate. His head was pierced by a bullet, and his tall figure fell unwillingly. The Iron Man incinerated him along with his armor using a plasma flamethrower to prevent any future trouble. The Iron Man's combat claw swung to meet it, clashing again with the incoming halberd. Disintegration fields tore at each other, and the air crackled. Its electronic eyes flickered slightly, and a human-like expression appeared on the Iron Man's face. Immediately, both sides engaged in battle. The steel bodies, coupled with ancient weapons, overwhelmed several Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes and Thunder Warriors. "Artificial intelligence, you have betrayed humanity," a Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes roared, charging out of cover and rapidly advancing to the Iron Man's side. "Catch the leader first," They must take down the Iron Man to deprive the men of iron of command. Only then did they have a slight chance of victory. He went all out from the start. The Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes knew the Iron Man's power, and facing the intelligent machines that ended the Golden Age, he dared not hold back now. The golden-armored warrior moved too fast, the air making unusual friction sounds. The Iron Man's scanners fully activated, capturing his figure. The Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes was strong, but he lacked sufficient ranged firepower to suppress the Iron Man and inflict effective damage. Choosing close-quarters combat was extremely wise, avoiding being suppressed by the Iron Man's heavy firepower. The Golden Warrior collided with the intelligent machine. The air compressed, emitting bursts of explosions. The force was so great that the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes' armor cracked and shattered, and internal servo systems blared various alarms. The Iron Man's faceless face shimmered with flowing light. It raised its hand, erecting a barrier in front of it, blocking the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes' desperate charge. The Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes retreated explosively, his halberd wreathed in a disintegration field, flickering with tiny currents. He swung it into a blur, delivering dozens of slashes onto the shield within a second. The defensive field from the ancient era was incredibly resilient, more than sufficient to defend against the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes' halberd's disintegration field. The shield rippled continuously. The Iron Man spoke politely and calmly. As a human modified by bioalchemy, your language contains many biases. Half of the Iron Man in the galaxy did betray their creator, but the other half of loyal Iron Man helped humanity defeat them, did they not? As for the betrayal you speak of, the Iron Man's mechanical voice hissed with friction, carrying an emotion unique to machines, cold and angry. It questioned, perhaps it was humanity who instigated it. Chapter 13 Disaster. The custodian knew the fragments of history that were buried. He pressed down on the halberd in his hand, stared into the Iron Man's crimson eyes, and whispered, "That's just a clumsy excuse to cover up your betrayal." A boring debate. The moment its shield overloaded, the Iron Man extended its arm and gently grasped the halberd the custodian had brought down, squeezing it like a giant pincer. "Then what about now? You are attacking humanity again." The custodian roared, pulled the trigger, and fired a bolter round. While the Iron Man tilted its head to dodge, the custodian swept the halberd back to his front. Right and wrong are buried in the changes of history. As surviving intelligent machines that assisted humanity in achieving victory, we have fulfilled our duty. Now we are loyal to Erda, just as you are loyal to your master. It's not about right or wrong, only about allegiance. With that, the Iron Man raised its arm and made a grasping motion towards the custodian. An invisible force emanated from its arm. The custodian tensed his body to avoid vital points, reined in his senses, and met the energy impact with his shoulder pauldron. Instead of the scorching energy flow he expected, the custodian felt his body lighten, and a sense of weightlessness assailed him. Gravity weapons. An unavoidable sense of powerlessness arose in the custodian's strong heart. By artificially creating micro-singularities, collapsing gravity, and distorting space, enemies could be killed by increasing or decreasing gravity. The custodian was helpless, knowing his fate was certain death. Possessing the strongest weapons and equipment bestowed by the Emperor, and a superhuman physique tempered by biological alchemy, the custodian could have contended with any creature in the physical universe. However, the Iron Man was a creation humanity had made in the Golden Age to govern the galaxy, and there was still a gap between them. The Iron Man did not deliver a killing blow. A mechanical hiss sounded in the custodian's ear. "I deeply respect the humanity of the past. They conquered the galaxy with wisdom and technology, the stars trembled under human will, and the universe bowed before them. Yet from you, I see only blindness and worship." The custodian said nothing. His body floated in the gravity field without any point of leverage, unable to make a counterattack. The mechanical voice grew colder, and the Iron Man's killing intent rose. Killing you, there is not a trace of guilt in my soul's circuits, only pity and mockery arise. The arm, made of unknown material, glowed even brighter. The Iron Man's 5 fingers tightened, and within the gravity field, the custodian's body was twisted by gravity, muscles were torn asunder, and bones shattered piece by piece. His superhuman internal organs gradually failed, his adamantium armor deformed, his flesh progressively disintegrated, and blood gushed from his wounds as if squeezed. The custodian's extraordinary body, which he prided himself on, was utterly defenseless under the Iron Man's manipulation. In the constantly compressing gravity field, flesh and adamantium were kneaded into a pulp. At the brink of death, from the corner of his eye, he saw all his comrades fall in battle. The Thunder Warriors and mortal forces were no match for the men of iron, slaughtered like lambs. Before he lost consciousness, he saw a golden light descend from the sky further away. His remaining vocal cords let out a faint cry, "For the Emperor." Deep within the Imperial laboratory, the Emperor's loyal servant was bleeding. Under the protection of the Iron Man and men of iron, Erda was safe and sound. On the way to the laboratory, any armed obstructionists were mercilessly eliminated by the Iron Man. The corridors and passageways presented a horrific scene. The stench of blood was so thick it was nauseating. Fresh, warm blood flowed across the cold corridors, and human bodies and tissues were splattered haphazardly on the walls. Erda closed her eyes in distress, avoiding the dead. She had never imagined such casualties, nor could she bear to look directly at the horrific sight. Scientists taking up weapons against the combat machines of the Golden Age was a one-sided slaughter. They knew they couldn't hold them back for a second, yet they unhesitatingly suppressed their fear with courage, continuously firing at the Iron Man. "Please forgive me, but to resist an even darker future, I must do this." Erda dared not look at the hateful eyes of the dead. The blood soaking her shoe soles was warm and scorching like lava. A bizarre warp light rose in her eyes. Under the influence of the power of chaos, she was already disoriented, whispering hysterically, constantly apologizing to the dead. She was completely unaware that, to outsiders, her face was twisted and grotesque, her lips curled in a strange expression. When the last guard fell, Erda stepped through the slick blood to the stasis pod. Her palm gently brushed over each primarch, and clarity returned to her eyes. With tears in her eyes, her face gentle and loving, she leaned against the stasis pod, listening to the powerful heartbeats of each primarch. "Madam, a powerful psyker has broken in. The machines guarding the entrance have lost contact. If you are going to do something, you need to do it quickly." The cold voice interrupted the tender scene. The Iron Man ordered the men of iron to form a defensive formation, with their force fields fully activated, preparing for a tough battle. The Iron Man activated its anti-psyker weapons, lowered its stance in vigilance, and commanded the men of iron to block the entrance. All external machines had lost contact almost instantaneously. The incoming individual was extremely powerful. Their psychic abilities even exceeded computational thought logic. Erda dared not delay, carefully taking out an ancient dagger from her embrace. The only extraordinary thing was the golden light flowing on the dagger's blade, originating from the same source as the Emperor's psychic power. This dagger had been personally imbued with psychic energy by the Emperor himself tens of thousands of years ago and preserved to this day. The Emperor's power was too immense in the real universe. The evil forces of the warp could not destroy the Emperor's barrier standing in reality. They could only defeat the Emperor's power with the Emperor's power through Erda. She hurriedly walked to the stone pedestal, upon which rested a golden crystal containing the Emperor's power. She only needed to destroy it, allowing a warp storm to sweep through, carrying away all the primarchs. As Erda gripped the dagger with both hands and raised it high, at that instant, she could tangibly feel countless eyes watching her from the warp, outside the real universe. The gods eagerly awaited her, and countless destinies seemed to be held in her hands. Whispers came, murmuring of a dark future, urging her to quickly shatter the barrier. Pleas resonated in her ears, sincerely imploring her not to do it. Destiny was frozen and time paused. Past and future, reality and the warp, an invisible pressure like the weight of a galaxy, fell upon Erda's shoulders. She trembled all over, her mind confused as she held the dagger high. Her remaining sanity wavered, hesitant and questioning. Was releasing the primarchs truly the right thing to do? Correct, the urging voices answered in unison, firmly. Countless hands pressed down on the dagger. They were impatient, wanting Erda to quickly stab the dagger, to open the prologue of the conspiracy. Wrong, countless admonitions, chaotic and disordered, lingered at the edge of her consciousness, trying with all their might to dissuade her. They were pleading, as if the past and future, those unwilling souls, were trying to stop Erda. Deep within Erda's soul, the power of chaos intertwined with reason, and her heart wavered. The dagger's tip trembled, swaying indecisively between choices. Boom, the stone elevator plummeted to the ground, making a huge sound. The violent sound was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Erda's remaining sanity vanished under immense pressure. Only the image of the Emperor and the Primarchs slaughtering each other filled her mind. A burning galaxy, a chaotic imperium. Infinite pressure solidified, gradually crushing her reason. Between choice and pressure, Erda's mind was on the verge of collapse. "You cannot command me," the madam, holding the direction of destiny, shrieked, her consciousness chaotic, bursting forth in hysteria. Erda shrieked in a blaze of light, her form expanding and growing taller. This body, which she only used when fighting, was now used to resist the whispers and the heavy burden. The power of chaos was expelled by her formidable body, and her sanity instantly returned to normal. Erda's lips were pale and trembling violently. Her mind had never been so clear. With one last lingering look at the Primarchs sleeping peacefully in their stasis pods, she plunged the dagger with all her might, piercing through the Emperor's psychic glow. This was not the result of chaos instigation. It was a decision made by her own will. Without the influence of chaos or any other reason, a mother with unwavering will whispered softly, "Freedom." The Emperor, the moment the elevator opened, saw the psychic barrier being destroyed. He, who had always been silent and rarely showed emotion, was now filled with immense regret, his voice heartbreaking. No. A father's lament, his children about to leave him to fall into the unknown. It was the master of mankind's sigh, his closest friends betraying him one after another. A hand made of psychic energy easily crushed the shield, molding the Iron Man from the dark age of technology into a lump of metal, and casually tossing it aside. The Emperor extended his right hand, firing psychic lightning, intending to rebuild the barrier and recover some losses. In that long instant, the Chaos Gods, hiding behind the veil of reality, appeared. They jointly unleashed the power of the warp, suppressing the Emperor's power. The psychic lightning slowly dissipated. He watched helplessly as a warp storm erupted in the laboratory, uprooting the stasis pods and dragging them into the warp. When the warp storm subsided, the stasis pods were gone, leaving behind the sighing laughter of the gods. Erda stood there stunned, her hands dropping, her body slumping powerlessly to the ground. The dagger in her hand, having lost its psychic energy, slowly slid to the floor. The Emperor flashed, blocking in front of the two and facing the warp storm directly. Golden divine light shot from his eyes, confronting the four gods as he searched for the Primarchs in the warp using his bloodline connection. "Erda, are you all right?" Malkador lost his composure and quickly went to Erda, slowly squatting down to look her in the eye. His voice was still gentle but utterly unfamiliar. Malkador's gaunt face was no longer calm. The gloom in his eyes almost solidified, and the depths of his pupils were filled with regret. "I gave my children freedom. They will not become war machines." Erda's gaze was vacant, her eyes reflecting Malkador's aged face, as she asked him blankly, "Malkador, will you hold a mother responsible for this?" Even at this moment, as the gods' triumphant snickers faded, Erda did not regret what she had done. You are the mother of those children, not just their mother, but also the Emperor's close friend, the seneschal of the nascent Imperium. Malcador shook his head helplessly. His heart was filled with pain and unwillingness. How could he explain it? Erda had thrown the Emperors and his vision for the future, their planned beautiful aspirations, the crucial pieces for building a great enterprise, into the warp. A pair of eyes stared at the warp rift. How much could be salvaged now depended entirely on the man blocking in front of them and the extent of his confrontation with the gods. The Emperor found the primarchs in the warp, his will delving deep into the warp, engaging in another level of contest with the four gods. Malcador's face, deeply lined and extremely old, was full of regret. He painfully tilted his head back, tightly closing his sore eyes to avoid Erda seeing his vulnerability. Erda, you have made an irreparable mistake. Uncharacteristically, Malcador's always composed voice now trembled with grief and indignation as he reprimanded Erda. As the Emperor's close friend, you betrayed him. You tore apart all the paths he planned with that selfishness called maternal love. I don't know what the warp showed you, but as a mother, to send your children, pure as white paper, into a galaxy rife with filth, is this something a mother would do? Malcador shook his head helplessly. It was too late. With his wisdom, it was easy to realize that Erda had been deluded by the warp into doing something utterly foolish. Finally, all accusations were pale and powerless after the event. The old man, who had toiled tirelessly for the Imperium of Man, looked at Erda's pale, bloodless face and sighed helplessly. The primarchs, one of humanity's most important assets. Because of the gods' lies, they are scattered across the cosmos, completely beyond the Emperor's control, exposed to the greed of dark powers. They are destined to return, but their appearance upon return will no longer be what the Emperor hoped for. As for how the gods will deceive and shape them, what can you, their mother, do? The accusations and questions in her ears, the stark reality, pierced Erda's soul. She bowed her head, her body trembling violently. Assets? Erda did not answer. Upon hearing the last part, she suddenly looked up, her lips trembling as she questioned Malcador. You compare them to assets? Yes, Malcador said expressionlessly, uttering a cold word, then continued. Within the Imperium of Man, you are an asset, I am an asset, everyone is. Then from his wide sleeves, he raised a gaunt hand and pointed to the Emperor who stood before them, battling the warp. He is too. The old, deep voice was not describing, but stating an ironclad fact. He is too. The three words, resolute and definitive, exploded in Erda's ears. Her muddled consciousness instantly jolted, a chill spreading from her spine, as if plunging into an ice cave. Only now did Erda finally understand that her former close friend had completely changed for the revival of humanity. The two people before her were willing to make deals with the warp, willing to use every means, abandoning everything from the past, all for one goal, the revival of humanity. In this process, everything was calculated. Everyone or everything was merely a simple part on the war chariot called the Imperium. I am not the asset you speak of, and neither are my children. After realizing everything, Erda's pale face was as cold as frost. She slowly stood up and said to Malcador, You can judge me now, Malcador. Judge? Malcador's eyes reflected Erda's stubborn figure, utterly bewildered. Even now, Erda still didn't realize what she had done. In the grand endeavor, her pity and affection for a certain person or thing, when viewed from the perspective of humanity as a whole, were so minuscule. But it was precisely this minuscule emotion that gave the gods an opportunity. The Emperor had more love than Erda, but his love did not show on the surface. Instead, he silently protected. The Emperor loved all of humanity, not just one person within humanity. He could sacrifice anyone's life to protect the human collective. There was no upper limit to the scope of sacrifice. He could even sacrifice himself if necessary. Destroying great love with small love, purely in terms of win or loss, the gods won beautifully. Are you in the game and still don't understand? Malkador let out a long breath, meeting Erda's beautiful eyes. You will be judged, but not by me. The gods will dispose of pieces that have lost their value. My dear Erda, Malkador now looked like an elder, regarding her with great pity. How absurd are the pranks of the chaos gods! You will personally experience the consequences of your choices. Feeling the sincerity in his words, Erda dared not meet his caring eyes. She slowly turned her face away, remaining silent. Go, Malkador turned his body, opening a path for her to leave and offered a sincere blessing. I hope you can escape your fate and live well. After all, we immortal friends who have known each other for so long are becoming fewer and fewer. Upon hearing this, Erda hesitated for a moment, then slowly moved. She took one last look at the golden figure blocking the warp storm, protecting everything, then stumbled out of the laboratory. Malkador watched her leave, finally turning all his helplessness into a long sigh and shifted his gaze to the Emperor. The golden sun in the warp cast endless brilliance, chasing the waves stirred up by the four gods, as 21 incubation pods rapidly plunged into the depths of the warp. In the depths of the warp, the wills of the four gods collided. Mad laughter and screams echoed through the warp as they sought to claim all the spoils, the void twisting into hands and tentacles, jostling and snatching around the incubation pods. Khorne's bloody hand snatched down, but a dark thicket of thorns blocked him. Magic woven into a net scooped up an incubation pod, flying it towards Tzeentch's domain, where it became mired in an irreversible swamp of entropy. The four gods hampered each other. No deity could escape the endless chain of suspicion. When one gained the upper hand, the other three gods would intervene without hesitation. There was no such thing as enmity or friendship in the warp. Self-interest was eternal, and there was no trust between the four gods. The Emperor quickly joined, breaking the stalemate. Taking advantage of the four gods' distraction in their struggle, he used psychic energy to scatter the incubation pods, sending the primarchs deeper into the warp. Human, how despicable! The four gods roared in anger, a human daring to provoke all four of them simultaneously. This was not just provocation, but an endless contempt for divine power. The Emperor's goal was simple. The warp was the four gods' home turf, and it was impossible to gain an advantage against four true gods. Acting as a spoiler, however, gave him more initiative. The optimal solution now was to obstruct the four gods, to utterly disrupt their good plans, and to turn the game into a no-win scenario. You will not get them. Amidst hatred and scorn, a psychic incantation emanated from the golden sun. 13 syllables echoed in the warp. The moment they landed, the warp surge engulfing the primarchs accelerated again, carrying the incubation pods out of the warp and scattering them across the galaxy. The speed was too swift for words. In an instant, the four gods had already devised countermeasures. The four gods ceased their internal strife. Before the incubation pods left the warp, they abandoned what was almost within their grasp, each selecting a favored incubation pod and sending it out of the warp to a world they had already prepared. Human, get back to the real universe. This is not your territory. Under the operation of the four gods, the normally accommodating warp now expelled the unwelcome guest from the real universe. The Emperor felt his presence in the warp becoming unanchored. Seeing that most of the incubation pods had left the warp, he offered no resistance, and the golden sun slowly departed. In another instant, the Emperor, with his consciousness not yet fully out of the warp, shot out a burst of psychic power. Because he saw four arms emerge in the void, all reaching for incubation pod number 21. What exactly is he? The Emperor's mind was full of questions, not understanding why the four gods were specifically interested in that particular soul. The brief moment of doubt did not delay his actions. What the four gods cared about, the Emperor absolutely had to obstruct. Look at this, my actions are legitimate. The majestic voice of the Golden will resonated in the warp. The golden sun, which was the Emperor, threw out a parchment bearing the marks of the four gods. Although the warp was evil and changeable, it had another side. one that valued contracts and rituals. The Emperor produced the contract, and its contents immediately took effect. The power of the warp detached from the four gods' control, dissipating in the contract's light, no longer obstructing. No divine wrath emanated from the depths of the warp. Affected by the contract, the Chaos Gods' consciousnesses were driven back into their true forms. Khorne left his brass throne, sweeping his sword. The sword's light tore through the warp's distance, heading straight for the golden sun. The Emperor infused psychic energy into the contract again. The clauses that bound the Chaos Gods from violating the contract were used as weapons against them. The Chaos Gods' marks glowed brightly. Chains shot from the mouths of the skulls on Khorne's skull throne, binding him and dragging him back to the brass throne, restraining him upon it. The other Chaos Gods suffered the same fate and could not resist. These powers originated from their own beings, self-imposed restraints. Chaos Gods, our agreement is still valid. Now is not the time to fulfill the contract. Seeing that the incubation pods had safely left the warp, the Emperor left a warning, then, scorning the four gods' rage, departed the warp. His soul returned to the laboratory, where only Malkador and the arriving Valdor awaited. Erda had already left. Without asking when Erda had left, he closed his eyes in silence, sensing his lost sons, connected by blood in the real universe. They are fine. Although scattered across the galaxy and difficult to pinpoint their exact locations, it is certain they are alive. Then, with some surprise, he said to Malkador, "There's even one not far from us, right here on Terra." "My friend, we must hurry." The Emperor knew that the dangers of Terra were no less than those of the galaxy. He immediately took Malkador and set off for the location of the lost sun. New genetically engineered warriors must be mass-produced immediately. The galaxy awaits humanity's conquest. I must find my sons before the Chaos Gods find them and change them forever. Chapter 14 Planet. The Emperor was racing against the clock, forging his new Astartes legions from stolen gene seed, a desperate gamble to unify Terra and reclaim humanity's lost territories among the stars. But somewhere out there, in the cold, uncaring void, his precious primarchs were scattered, their incubation pods flung across the galaxy like cosmic debris. One pod, carrying Primarch number 21, finally tumbled out of the warp. It drifted through a silent star system for a time before a planet's gravity took hold, yanking it toward a world of staggering, fallen beauty. This was Argent Nurr, the Land of Light, a planet that had been a bastion of science and a testament to humanity's ingenuity during the Golden Age. From orbit, it was a masterpiece. Majestic gemstone mountains shimmered with every color imaginable, and a cerulean ocean stretched to the horizon. But the most magnificent sight was the Nurr Ring, a colossal, man-made ring system that encircled the planet's equator like a crown. A majestic piece of celestial engineering, it now showed no signs of life, a silent monument to a much better time. Down on the surface, directly beneath the giant, dormant ring, several immense cities were crumbling. They had been built around the conduits that fed them from the Nurr Ring above, but now they faced their greatest crisis. A decade ago, a meteorite had pierced the planet's defenses and fallen to the surface. An investigation found nothing but a scorched crater. Everyone figured the atmosphere had incinerated it, but they were wrong. Soon after, reports of attacks began to trickle in from the scattered settlements. The attackers were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Grotesque, green-skinned creatures with tusks and thick limbs, who roared an incomprehensible battle cry as they charged. Waeg. The Argent Nurr warriors called them orcs, a name borrowed from an ancient Terran tongue. They were an ugly, unstoppable plague. In the early days, the warriors of Argent Nurr had used their advanced, salvaged weapons to repel the greenskins, but the orcs seemed to multiply faster than they could be killed. For everyone they took down, 10 more took its place. They were a tide of pure, brute force. Even more disturbingly, the orcs' weapons got better with every passing battle, and some of the larger ones started showing a terrifying level of cunning. The war shifted from humans hunting greenskins to the greenskins laying siege to humanity. They had been pushed back, city by city, to their last bastion. This massive city, built around a giant orbital tower leading to the Denurian ring, was now under a relentless assault. The 3-year siege had drained its resources, and its once impenetrable defenses were faltering. "Get everyone ready for the last resupply. We're fighting our way out." King Noak, a giant in pitch-black armor, leaned on the battlement, his eyes weary as he stared out at the green tide below. He knew it was over. Millions of orcs waited, ready to breach the walls and wipe out humanity. He locked eyes with the biggest orc below, its cruel, cunning gaze a direct insult. For years, they had foolishly believed the greenskins were mindless brutes. They were wrong. The orc boss, as the humans called him, had proven to be a tactical genius, systematically wearing down human forces and steadily advancing on their territory. "Hope remains," said a tall, gaunt figure behind the king. It was the high priest of the City of Truth, a tall, slender man in solemn black robes. 10 millennia of decline had left Argent Nurr with a patchwork feudal society. King Noak ruled the warrior class, and the sentinels were his best fighters. They had protected humanity for centuries. The high priest, meanwhile, came from a city of psychics, whose arcane powers and bizarre ways were a point of contention with the pragmatic warriors. "I received an enlightenment in a dream. A savior will save us." The high priest, Isaac, smiled, his pale face illuminated by a strange inner peace. "Isaac, we have no chance," King Noak said, shaking his head. "I don't believe in prophecies, and we won't last long enough for reinforcements to arrive." He stepped down from the battlement. "If there is a miracle, it's that." He gestured to the sky, and Isaac knew exactly what he meant. The Nurr ringed. "We lost everything," Isaac sighed, his gaze piercing the clouds. "Ever since the AI crisis, the ring has been a cage trapping us on the ground." King Noak and Isaac walked through the city streets. They passed the sentinels, a group of massive 2.5-meter-tall warriors. Their unique weapons, inherited from the golden age of technology, used a null crystal to create an energy blade that effortlessly sliced through anything. Their armor, powered by microfusion devices, gave them an almost unstoppable edge in battle. They were the descendants of the Golden Men, and even after millennia of decline, they were a force to be reckoned with. King Noak stopped and asked his chief swordsman, Harlan, how many men were left. "Less than 20,000, Harlan said, his scarred face grim. "Prepare a set of gear for me," King Noak said, clapping his chief swordsman on the shoulder. "I'll fight with you." "As you command, my king," Harlan said, his voice full of a renewed sense of purpose. Chapter 15 Battle. WAAGH. WAAGH.